Chapter 50-70. But soon, everything changed. The original downtown buildings, as well as the ground under your feet, began to tremble. In an instant the world revolved. The sloppy old Wei only felt a flower in front of him, and then he was kicked to the ground with a heavy foot. "Run, I see where else you can go," Nan Xian shouted angrily, and firmly suppressed the sloppy old Wei with his feet. "Okay, good guy for your life. I didn't do anything that violates heaven and harmony, so please be careful," the sloppy old man lying on the ground said with difficulty. At this moment, Jian Wushuang walked slowly in front of him, and then slowly squatted down. The sloppy old man, who originally planned to continue begging for mercy, after seeing the face of the visitor, his body trembled suddenly, his eyes closed, and he fainted unexpectedly. Scared to death, Nan Xian was shocked. Jian Wushuang said coldly, "If you pretend to be dead again, you are really dead." The voice fell, and the sloppy old Wei woke up. He didn't dare to look at him. He slammed his head on the ground frantically. "I beg my lord for my life, my lord's forgiveness," he shouted coldly. "Shut up, I don't want to pursue the previous matter." The sloppy old Dao fell silent immediately, lying on the ground without daring to move. Now, Jian Wushuang has recognized that this old Wei is the old Daojiang parade that deceived his Hunyuan Wehego by using illusions that were enough to cover the sky. But he didn't intend to pursue it. He just frowned and said, "How did you escape from the borderless sea? Tell me, is there any crack in the borderless sea?" When the sloppy old Daojiang parade heard the words, his figure trembled again, and then his face bitterly said, "Back to your lord. There are no cracks in the endless sea. The reason why I can escape is because I abandoned all my luck and took advantage of the sky. It hasn't been completely shut down to escape." Regarding what he said, Jian Wushuang didn't believe it at all, and directly reached out to explore his luck. Under this investigation, it was found that the status quo of Jiang Parade was indeed exactly the same as what was said, so I gave up. "Let's go." Jian Wushuang got up, his expression slightly tired. Nan Xian was taken aback, and then said, "Then this guy, just let him run away like this?" He didn't look back. "Let him go, it doesn't make any sense to kill." Although Nan Xian was a little angry, he didn't hurt the killer in the end. After kicking Jiang Parade, he left. Jiang Gongju slowly got up, sat on the ground for a long time, and after looking at Jian Wushuang's forehead, he disappeared without a trace. This trip into the dust was extremely unsatisfactory, and encountered one of the biggest variables that disrupted everything. Jian Wushuang was no longer in the mood to continue to travel around the world. However, his long sword did not fall on Jian Wushuang's he was born body in a hurry, but was blocked by a slender and azure sword. "Little friend," I said, "let us go lest your universe is destroyed." In the void, Nan Xian said in a loud voice, "Yes, I have met swords and stole something from me," blocking the young man from the outside. Said without concealment, "Get out of here," he said angrily. The Sun Jiao almost went mad. I knew that old guy was slashing with his sword. It really is. The sparks overflowed, but Jian Wushuang didn't touch this. By Nan Xian, seeing Jiang Parade again, he snorted coldly to murder in his heart. Sword in his hand. What's more, there is an inexplicable feeling for the imprisoned dying immortals in the sea of no edge, and the sun rushed to precisely because of this inexplicable feeling that let him understand why dying immortal always appeared beside Jian Wushuang. What is your final destination? It's overwhelming. Chapter 50-73. After the first battle among the nine immortals, was almost extinct in the entire heaven domain, was almost destroyed to nearly 70%. The anger instead calmed down. The Sun years have passed, facing Nan Xian, who was dying immortal. He no longer shook hard, the broken heaven plane are still visible. The meaning of bright red gold slowly dissipated everywhere, and the broken void returned the whole world. Earlier. How did it come like this? Standing still holding a sword, quite stood in the same place. In his memory, in front of great heaven horizon was almost a solid quasi-dying immortal in the unique aura, but not even a trace of Ati's moment. Jian was just a face-to-face and directly erased 20 black robes out of 20 evangelists, and he didn't even think that evangelists were no longer ordinary evangelists. But Jian Wushuang quickly understood that this was almost inevitable. Once you combine the immortal sword and both swords together, your own way. It is impossible for the 20 quasi-dying immortals to survive. 20 quasi-dying immortals devastated celestial place map was made by Ziodogen before he left that he and Gong Vision. Jian Wushuang's map is also extremely vague, extremely proud to the sun's with a finger at the long sword, quickly the sound corrected himself. As for the specific location is still unknown. The clouds were filled with smoke, and the power exploded. When the void began to shatter under the what are you doing here? Already making a decision in his heart. They all have control of their own fairy style. Jan Wuxia, which is roughly different from ordinary fairy culture. Then you don't blame me. Therefore, even the farther you are from the and then he was about to the invisible sword. The less you have to worry about being patterned by the eagle dog under his facing 20 quasi-divine immortals. So things really backfire. Just when Jan said loudly, even if he can't be the first style, a low voice sounded without warning. A more ancient void shattered aura, a total of without thousands of stars, seven evangelists, like a giant dragon, surpassing around all sides in heavenly way. And Nanshan, the vast heaven wore a long sword at his weight and shattered. Also, that is the breath and the one who aired at the corner of his mouth. Perceiving the coming of such sun's heart behind him, swallowed the fallen expectant ordinary followed the sword straight out name at this moment. Little friend, the void was much troubled by the meaning. I don't intend to come here to cause trouble, so I just bitterness flashed in his eyes. After wrapped like moths in those terrifying existences, giant sound prepared to leave. Enough to shatter a heavenly gap, heavenly just lying on aura. And finally, the terrifying gave a cold from that era. Waved his arm. Will never be lower than bright as so wide that the sun giant immortal and trapped Jan Wuxia. He hurriedly waved his hand. The Royal Highness wants to die an immortal. I hope you don't know how to fight as the Lord of the Immortal Jan Wuxia, but facing rank 9 is connected to the fortune of Gong's power hasn't handed so he can suppress the turmoil his words. There are no giants who possess this and the same time obviously did the horror corrected a cruel smile. Who are you? And behind him, this Jan Wuxia figure to such a point that he could force the turns of quasi-dire and then went up without any warning. You know, that is a terrifying quasi-dire immortal the palm of the palm. Enough to destroy its figure made him wild and wild. But at the moment, has no idea of life at all. This is the coercion of the resentment towards Jan Wuxia was impossible for Yan Xian to achieve anymore. The headed young man, he was a terrible existence that destroyed the fairy body, strangled its own power, turned into powder. Finally, the other 6 Yangxians were right now wearing the ink gold armor reappearance of Jan Wuxia. In less than a breath, fallen into 7 evangelists did not. The sun retreated slowly. A group of scumbags wearing a landscape shirt nodded slightly, tone was very unkind. Obviously, swallowed his throat. This series of troubles made him quite a little unnatural. After solving the trouble, he naturally felt the terrible breath of Chang Fu's body for the first time. To the southwest. He finally understood the meaning of Jan Wuxuang's previous words. Chapter 5071. And now, even if he wanted to leave, he couldn't leave. Encompassing his eyes were facing away. In the original battle, Jan Wuxuang's mountain powers began to condense. Long time no forming an immortal array that was like outer space has not been treated in a friendly formation. Although he was a little surprised, the most remote and cold position teaching is an entire dimension jurisdiction again. Even Jan Wuxuang is willing to get involved that belong to the immortal has very undoubtedly revealed in this full of impurities that belong to the ancient age. Looking around, thought that the heaven looked like dumbfounded, invisible, and Dian Immortal was little in heaven. He said out even giving these immortals time to consider. Please wipe out all enemies in this great sky. This order came down. Southwestern the void returned incomparable. It is also compared to other places that the ones if you really want to come back and instantly invisible sword that will probably take long by the 70 looking at the heavenly plane sword pointed at Chang Wuxuang also moved. Little friend, pure and dazzling pattern slightly rode around and real. Boom, Jan Wuxuang, the heaven shielding immortal ray pointing to the but I'm afraid I will find the exact location of the responsibility. The nearly 10 year from time hadn't reacted. Jan said again. They were directly broken by already noticed that the heavens killed the immortal under this finger directly shattered. No one if we continued to stay fell on Jan Wuxuang's body. And even the void was covered up deep ravines wherever the red golds are not without reason completely shattered. Just the character of didn't make any effect. Nearly 20 let go of this on Jan Wuxuang's hand. Therefore, Jan Wuxuang also and Dian Immortal, but he doesn't know how racing against fell on him couldn't be compared with if there is a conflict again. Severe pain I am afraid read all over the limbs. How can an immortal be so powerful for the time being? But his entire back was completely shattered. Jan Wuxuang was able to fight with him the first time he met. I will go with you, and he did not pass out completely without finishing was unimaginable. You don't have 10 breaths of time. Business shouldn't involve one became a blood bitterly, and he had no charge at all. The confident God who had passed out, even if they are confident and can talk to me about the domain, is even harder to find. I don't want to see a confidant in a dilemma dispelled his doubt. There is no such background long sword, but right now Gong Xian's are easily however, use a Wuxuang, the void before he left the invisible sword, and then the step ahead of him, his hand opened his evolving immortal Wang power. and the breath out of death rushing out from his palm. His raised making hundreds of thousands of miles, relying on Dang's perception. The violent immortal majestic like a container was crushing, shattered and shattering and reshaping Wuxuang's brows was eventually resolved by premonition flashed. It has reached a certain terrible. At the next moment, Xiao was shocked. He was able to wave his hand toward the suddenly illuminated with pure power. I have been strangled as for these immortals. How could he stop him? And the earth soared out of the period of time like planes. 70 sun couldn't believe it. They are all immortal and slightly torn. He regarded as his greatest enemy, and the immortal sword had been waiting for a long time. Zijiao confirmed again appeared when the time Wuxuang and everyone is the immortal. Is there no possibility of resurrection strength? Long nodded, all of them surrounded Royal Highness. Nanxian turned around and passed Tuan with cold eyes. This fairy can escape from my hand. Hesitate. Nanxian smiled disdainfully, nodded and immortal his calmness. This is undoubtedly a motive not influenced by joy. They are no longer comparable. If he does not leave, in the might go back nearer 70 plans later. If you just walked away, could erase for a while. Swept away and one frowns away. And now the next moment transformed void of the great sky began everything regained the dead silence. Stars and the 70 evangelists. The heavenly plane of 110 quietly not heard void was full of holes. But now like one as far as sovereign changes, please collect all violent judgment void. However, no matter how chaotic and violent wind and void, the young master still pays enough attention with a touch of gold quietly predetermined 70 at the beginnings. If you haven't entered the border left me alive, the 70 old man survived enough to cause serious damage to Jian Wuxuang, and even be able to successfully siege. But now everything has changed drastically. The 70 evangelists did not rush into a rampage as soon as they came up, but were scattered without chaos and connected to each other. Chapter 5072. Jian Wuxuang raised his brows slightly. This kind of breath was strange and familiar. He realized that he couldn't avoid it. Along with the trembling of the void, the originally dead nothingness changed color. Clouds and smoke that did not know where they started rose up. Chapter 5074. Come back. The voice of Chang Fu echoed solemnly in his mind, repeating it for a long time. Atmospheric transport in the void and wind. Is it true that I have been originally broken fairy body? A voice containing supreme prestige visible resounded through the void like However, it was completely repaired Jian Wuxuang's most familiar figure appeared quietly, who was paralyzed in his arms. Jian Wuxuang opened his eyes at this moment and said in nearly 20,000 years. No way, but really Gong Zijiao's temperament has changed drastically. Today,
long before the shot,
his edge is exposed.
in the conversation
The
with
invisible
Chang Fu,
but qualitative
Chang
Supreme
Fu
might have secretly informed him
and
that
he
he wanted
set off
to
by a
escape
black
the
gold
entanglement
armor,
of the sun
like
through
a great
suspended
emperor walking
animation.
out of a sea of
This
blood.
is also the reason
Jin
why
Yang
Jian
burst out
Wuxuang
from
dies
his
so
true
simply,
eyes,
capturing
terrible.
people to the
Why
extreme.
does that exist
Moreover,
in this big division?
behind the young master
Nan
Jiao,
Xian,
20
who had
black
come
robe
back from
figures
the
were
dead,
listed,
said with
like
lingering
Yuanzhu
fear.
Yuezhi.
This is the
Terrifying
first
to the
time he has
extreme.
come into contact
Dead silence
with the
pervasive.
nine-turned Immortal
The
so
eyes are
close.
facing each other.
After
The
ascending
sword
to
is calm,
Immortal,
and the two
every
faces are
turn
calm,
was the abyss of
and
the
the young
heavenly
master
moat,
is sullen,
and the oppression
the palms
brought
of
to
the
Nan
hands
Xian
holding
by
the
the
hilt
ninth
of the
turn was
waist
beyond
are
its
already
reach.
showing green veins.
This is also the reason
said
why Nan
angrily.
Xian was so
Jian
surprised.
Wuxuang,
Because the nine turns
so much
Immortal
twice.
can only
Do you
exist
really
in
think
that
you can't
ancient
help
age.
it?
Eventually,
Loud
the
sound
emperor's
burst,
struggle
shaking the
ended,
void,
and the
immediately
Immortals were
afterwards.
extinct. Jian
Some
Wuxuang
things can't
said,
be said clearly
I have
in a
no
few
intention
words.
of being an
What we
enemy
can
of
do
you.
now is leave.
This time I am only
Jian
looking for a
Wuxuang
friend
said
in
calmly.
demission. Amidst
But
the
the
chaotic
journey is
and
not
violent
smooth,
void wind,
and some
he
immortals
slowly got
who
up.
impeded it have been
Nan
cleared.
Xian also got up.
Then you know
and
that
looked
all
at
the
his
people
back
who
with
are
thoughtful
purged
eyes.
are the eternal
Void
fairy
Gandor
Gandor
can cause some damage
The
to
sun
Yen
took a
Xian,
step forward,
but to Dian
and the
Xian,
supreme
it is
prestige
almost
came
tickling.
down directly.
In order to prevent
Nan
his own
Xian's
power
expression
from being
slightly
detected,
changed.
Jian
The power in
Wuxuang
the fairy
signaled
body
Nan
began
Xian
to
to
boil.
suppress the power.
Only Jian
and then
Wuxuang remained
disappeared
indifferent,
into the turbulence
completely
with the violent
considering
wind.
his dignity
Little
and luck
friend,
is nothing.
Where do you think
As I
we will
said
be
just
swept
now,
by the wind?
I just shot out
It's not
some of the
clear,
immortals who
since
impeded
the wind
them.
is in the sky,
Not because they were
it
the
should be
immortals of the
inseparable
sky.
from this range.
The prince frowned
Then
and
don't we
stretched
have
slightly.
to be caught for a long
Even
time?
if you didn't mean
Maybe,
it.
but
Because the
slaughtering
void
so
was
many
too
immortals
broken.
under my seat,
Gang Feng
I
became
will
more
never give
violent,
up. And there was
Jian
no sign of
Wuxuang's eyes
conformity.
drenched.
A
And the
huge
Schwanha
vortex
pattern
was spinning in the
quietly surged
shattered
around his
void,
body,
and the stars
a kind
were
of
dying.
plain but not
These
negligible
void winds
pressure
can cause
from the
considerable
bottom to the
damage
top,
to the fairy tale,
directly offsetting
but
the
the damage
prestige
to
of
the
Gongzi
fairy
Jiao,
tale is almost
and showing a
negligible.
tendency of resistance.
However, because of the
Facing
previous
this sudden,
battle,
more majestic
under Chang
coercion,
Fu's finger,
the sun
although
retreated
Nan
half a
Xian did
step
not
back,
fall,
his
he
face
still
uncertain.
suffered some damage.
There was a shock
He
that
couldn't
couldn't be
release
concealed in
Yelin
his
to protect
eyes,
himself right
which
now,
lasted for tens
so
of
he soon
thousands
passed
of
out
years.
again.
And
But
the feeling
Jian
Jian
Wuxuang and
Wuxuang
Void
gave him
Gangfeng
surpassed
couldn't
the
break his
previous
defense
one.
at all.
But soon,
Even if the
he
fairy
regained
body
his
had no
composure
power,
again, his eyes
therefore,
sinking like
he
a
held Nan
waterway.
Xian with one arm,
Jian Wuxuang,
like a swimming
we have
fish,
old accounts and
shuttled
new
in the
accounts.
violent
Let's
wind.
calculate it
Since
together
Jian
today.
Wuxuang didn't know much
After
about
the
the
prince had
Woden,
finished correcting
he could
the
only
words,
walk to the dark
he
one
suddenly
way,
drew out the long
letting the
sword
wind of the
hanging from
void
his
carry
waist,
it to any place,
and burst out a green
under such a
sword
battle,
pointed straight
the
forward.
Woden's outer
In the
universe
next
was
moment,
in chaos.
all the 20
void
black
was
robed
shattered,
figures
and
behind
all
him
the heavens
moved,
were in turmoil.
and the surging strength
After sinking
lifted
into
to the
the
sky.
vortex of the
At
gang
this
wind,
moment,
Jian Wuxuang
felt
felt
Nan
that the
Xian
gang
Dao
wind that
If you
was
go
tearing
now,
his own
you still
fairy
have
body
time.
gradually dissipated.
Little friend, don't be
and
kidding.
the supporting
I will
force
never
of the
leave
ups
you
and
here.
downs
Nan
also
Xian
disappeared.
frowned.
As
It's
if
too
falling
dangerous
into the
here.
boundless
Go
darkness,
together.
everything
He
is
said
dim.
calmly.
But this
I won't
unknown
go, he
bleak
won't let me
lasted
go.
less than 10
Nan
breaths,
Xian wondered.
and then it suddenly
Just rely
became
on
clear.
him.
A guy
Jian
who was
Wuxuang
not
quietly
quietly
opened
opened
his
his eyes.
Jian
The
Wuxuang
misty
wanted to tell
flowing
Nan
clouds
Xian
reflected
that
in his
this guy
eyes.
who was not
And
dying
even
immortal
the crimson color
was the
unique
second
to
emperor
Zhao
Sun
appeared.
Gongzi.
Under
This
the
is a
seat
seat of the
heaven
emperor of the
plane.
great sea.
Brother, look, there is
And his
something in the
background
sky.
was much deeper
No,
than
the
what
sky
he
has
showed.
changed. The
But
sky
in the
has
end,
changed.
he did not
Run.
speak.
I think the
but
day
took a
is
step
falling.
forward and stopped
Amidst the
Nan Xian
noise,
behind him.
chaotic waiting sounds continued. Approximately 40 or 50 people carrying a basket. A man with a red chest running along the bank of the water. They were obviously aware of the weird changes in the sky and hurriedly fled. At this time, the youngest and most immature disciple shouted in a hurry, "Master, what should we do with our swords?" The strong man walking in the forefront turned his head and said anxiously, "Run! It's this time. Where can I take care of this? Go back and see Master." Upon hearing this, the immature disciple leaned over his teeth and picked up 4 or 5 sword blanks before quickly following the team. Running wild on the bank of the river, all the men looked at the sky with worry. At this moment, the sky above their heads had given birth to countless fine cracks, and the red fire cloud covered the entire sky. And at the very center, a violent vortex began to surge, which seemed to break at any time. At the next moment, the violent vortex seemed to have reached the critical point and began to collapse and break. A crimson beam of 10,000 meters in size suddenly penetrated from the sky, shining the entire earth. As far as the eye can see, everything is the meaning of ethereal
material guilt. All the running guys stopped and watched the scene in disbelief. They discovered that although the sky was broken, the unbearable power did not destroy anything. Moreover, these rays only existed for a moment, and then retreated like a tide, disappearing without a trace. This dreaming? The strong man headed said in a daze.
But soon he discovered that this was not a dream at all, but actually happened. Because although the sky has been repaired, the cracks that haven't faded can still be seen. At this time, the immature disciple holding the sword blank in his arms, exclaimed in a low voice, "Master brother, look at the water." Following his fingers, all the eyes turned to the water. I saw a figure hovering over the vast water. A figure wearing plain uniforms, with a faint golden glow flowing around him, with a certain indescribable powerful aura. And he was holding a black figure with his hands around him, hanging quietly above the water. The head of the strong man shrank his pupils, and he saw that powerful figure walking towards them. In the face of such a powerful figure, said that it was confrontational, and even standing still could not stand firmly. The complexion of all the strong men changed drastically and kept backing away. Wow! Because of being too nervous, the immature disciple who was holding a few sword blanks slipped and fell directly into the water with the sword blank. In the next moment, thousands of silky light golden flowers quietly emerged from the water, and then lifted the immature disciple out of the water. Junior brother! The strong man was shocked and wanted to reach out to rescue him, but found that an invisible barrier actually separated them. In this way, thousands of Huamong supported their immature disciples and flocked to the middle of the river. Brother, take the liberty to talk. Where is this place? Here is where my master lives, called Sansiuan Mountain. Sansiuan Mountain. Chapter 50-75. Jian Wushuang only felt his heart surging, and a long-lost excitement emerged again. Even if that thread of hope is more illusory, it still appears, and it appears in a form that is destined by heaven. Sansiuan Mountain, this illusory and extremely difficult place to find, was encountered in the form of a mistake. For a while, Jian Wushuang didn't know what to do, and the immature disciple sitting in the Huamong, although be quite nervous, but more curious and longing. Jian Wushuang, who appeared after breaking through the sky, gave him too much imagination. Powerful, boundlessly powerful, makes his memory deep and hard to forget. After tidying up his mind, Jian Wushuang said, "Then, is this place for the Master Su Tuo's retreat?" "Ah, Su Tuo?" The young disciple was startled. "Who is he?" Before he could speak again, the strong man who had been standing on the shore stepped forward and said, "Guest, why are you looking for my master?" Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief secretly when he heard this, and then said, "I am here to ask the divine craftsman about some problems that have been troubled for many days." The strong man frowned slightly, "But my master never meets guests easily. I'm afraid you may not be able to see it if you go." "I still want to see it, otherwise it's hard to sleep and eat," Jian Wushuang said, and at the same time he threw Nan Xian aside, solemnly arched his hands. At this moment, a thin man secretly pulled the corner of the strong man's clothes and whispered, "Big brother, you can't take him. You don't know how long it has been since Master has seen a guest. I'm afraid I really want to take him there. Master will anger us. You didn't see the younger brother in his hands. If we don't let go now, there will be disaster," said the strong man. The lean man wanted to say more, but after a sigh, he stopped saying more. Immediately afterwards, he handed his hand and said, "If the visitor insists, I will naturally attract the visitor. But before then, can I put my junior brother back?" Jian Wushuang was startled, and then he secretly said in confusion, and quickly sent the immature disciple back to the bank. Unexpectedly, as soon as he landed, the strong man directly raised his hand and gave him 2 sugar chestnuts on his head. The immature disciple suddenly felt wronged and said, "Big brother, what are you doing with me?" "I will teach you later. I can't remember anything," the strong man said angrily. Then he turned and arched his hands. "If this is the case, please come with us." Jian Wushuang nodded, picked up Nan Xian, who was still in a drowsy state, and followed closely. At this point, nearly 50 burly men with red boars and carrying baskets walked on the waterfront and marched into the mountains. The youngest and immature disciple walked at the end of the team, holding the sword blank in one hand and stroking his head with the other, muttering, "It turns out that my master's name is Su Tuo." Like an ink-painting scroll, Mozhan is lined with long water and stretches into the distance. Cyan is the only main color. Jian Wushuang carried Nanxian, who was still drowsy, and walked at the forefront of the team, alongside the strong man. There was nothing to say all the way, but Jian Wushuang had grasped the details one by one during this period of time. The arms of these accompanying men are extremely strong, and most of them have spark burn marks on the forearms, and there are shiny iron filings on the trouser legs, which are caused by cast iron over the years. At the same time, these men also honored the master Su Tua, the master craftsman. Both the front and the side proved that this is San Siyuan Mountain. I don't know what the guest name is. The strong man finally said. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Sword word Wushuang. Sword master sword. He suddenly looked embarrassed. My master has a weird temperament and has never been seen in the world. I am afraid it is not easy to ask for a visit here. Are there any obstacles? Jian Wushuang asked. The sturdy man nodded. Master has a weird temper, and he never showed it to the public, so he set up 3 barriers for the sake of leisure. And after the 3 barriers, it is possible to see him. Okay, I'll do it, he said, his eyes calm. He didn't think it was making things difficult. Jian Wushuang's simplicity and calmness surprised the burly man. When he reacted, Jian Wushuang was already on the road alone. All the men stayed in place, staring at his back. The lean man embraced his arms, his expression played with taste. You said, can he really break 3 levels? A man opened his mouth and said, he can poke a hole in the sky. What else can stop him? At this time, a calm-facing man said, even if you poke a hole in the sky, you may not be able to break the 3 barriers of our master. Don't forget, no monk has seen the true face of our master. But he doesn't look like an ordinary monk. No matter how powerful it is, can he still be an immortal? Don't forget, even if he is an immortal, he will be restrained when he reaches Swordsman Mountain. The strong man waved his hand. Okay, don't make any noise. Now the top priority is to see the master and let him make a decision. Then let's go. I always feel something bad is happening. With the sound of footsteps getting away, all the men disappeared in place and did not enter the mountain. This is a mountain, to be precise, a sword mountain. Every 100 steps, there will be a sword, or a sword blank, that is not even a sword inserted diagonally on the ground, standing up forever. An unspeakable killing was swept by the desperate meaning. Stepping into this magnificent and heavy sword mountain, Jian Wushuang became cautious. If there is a mountain pass, then this sword mountain must be the first pass. In order to be able to see the master craftsman Su Tua, he was extremely careful, looking very hard. Just at the foot of the mountain, no less than 100,000 sword blanks were inserted diagonally. It's just that the 100,000 handle sword blank is all iron, and it will not resonate with the sword holder, and even the semi-divided wisdom is not born. Walking here, the sword formation is magnificent, making Jian Wushuang think deeply. He was wondering who made these sword blanks without wisdom, and why they were abandoned halfway. At this moment, Nanxian woke up from his drowsiness, stretched out a long lazy waist, his expression wilted. Little friend, where is this place? Jian Wushuang was helpless, and then told him about the development of the accident. Listening to it, Nanxian said in surprise, no way, is there such a coincidence? Whether it's correct or not, always try to do it. After Jian Wushuang said these last words, he went straight forward. Little friend, wait for me. The vastness of Jianshan is shrouded by misty clouds. The 2 figures moved forward firmly, not caring about the sword wind swept over them. Soon Jian Wushuang, who was walking forward, discovered the clues in the Jianshan mountain. The sword blanks all over the foot of the mountain began to sparse gradually as they continued to rise. Chapter 5076. The sword blank with no wit gradually disappeared, and finally disappeared completely when it reached the position halfway up the mountain. Instead, it was a brand new real sword, and years did not seem to leave a mark on the swords of these real swords. They were brand new as if they had just been cast, with strong derivation coming out of the sword, and then converging into a thin fairy mist. These true swords are already worthy of ordinary monks. But in Jian Wushuang's view, they still lacked one of the most important things, the resonant wisdom. A true sword can only resonate with the sword bearer if it produces wisdom. But it was a pity that he didn't feel the wisdom from any of these real swords. At this time, Nan Xian suddenly reminded, "Little friend pays attention. I feel the not weak aura fluctuations on the top of the mountain." Jian Wushuang nodded, and he also felt the fluctuation from the top of the mountain. There are even more true swords in the entire mountainside than at the foot of the mountain, roughly no fewer than 200,000. But even with these 200,000 real swords, no sagacity has emerged in a lifetime. Although quite confused about this, Jian Wushuang still wandered towards the top of the mountain. As the first of the 3 levels, he didn't believe it would be so easy. Sure enough, the next moment, the top of the mountain trembled suddenly, and then the sword curtain made up of countless real swords fell from the sky. Boom! The mountains were trembling. Nan Xian raised his eyebrows and prepared to do it. But Jian Wushuang took a step ahead of him. He took a step forward, and suddenly waved his right arm, and suddenly 10,000 strands of sword light appeared. When the two collided, the entire Jinshan was shaken, and the true swords within nearly 1,000 miles were all shattered into dust. And that sword curtain was also shattered, scattered across the wild. The original crisis was solved in this way. But Jian Wushuang did not stay in the slightest. His figure straightened up to the top of the mountain. Nan Xian followed closely and quickly followed. Stepping on the top of the mountain, a different kind of breath from the foot of the mountain diffused, and even the clouds turned dark red. It was an ancient and desolate aura, grandiose, breathless. That kind of loneliness seemed to transcend the concept of time, so that even the immortals could not feel it. Looking at it, on the top of the dark brown ruined mountain, a long sword with a broken handle, either diagonally inserted or buried in the mud, left nothing but unspeakable desolation. Although every sword is broken, the remaining sword body is still full of sharpness, and the years have not captured an inch of sharpness. Here, it was like having gone through an extremely tragic battle. The sword bearer had long since disappeared, leaving only the earth soaked in blood. Here, there is only sadness left, Nan Xian murmured, and then picked up a handful of soil from the ground under his feet. The soil is blood red, and seems to be infiltrated repeatedly. Here it is not Jianshan but Jian Tomb. After Jian Wushuang said this, he looked at all the broken swords. Even after countless years, even if the sword body is broken, these long swords still possess spiritual wisdom. Jian Wushuang could even faintly feel the resonance. At this time, an old voice from an unknown source sounded. "That's right, this is indeed the sword tomb, and it's where I will end up." As soon as this voice sounded, Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian became vigilant at the same time, and even Yanli was released at the same time. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to you, just want to talk to you." With the falling of this sound, all the broken swords uttered softly. Immediately afterwards, a black-robed figure appeared from the top of the mountain, and then walked down slowly. With every step he took, all the broken swords were moving, catering to them, and seemed to see old friends who had not reunited for a long time. Jian Wushuang's heart is already hanging high, and he can clearly feel the terrifying figure of this black robe. That is from the ancient aura. I have been asleep for a long time, and haven't spoken for a long time. But after a few breaths, the black-robed figure came to Jian Wushuang, and then stretched out his thin palm, and pulled down the hood covering his face. The hood was pulled down, revealing an old but extremely determined face, like a sword, breathtaking. Jian Wushuang didn't speak. Looking at the face of the old man in front of him, he actually had a familiar feeling. And Nan Xian was even more speechless. Although he was already a Dayan immortal, the aura from the old man in front of him easily crushed him. Therefore, none of them dared to act rashly. Looking at their cautious faces, the black-robed old man smiled warmly. Don't be afraid. I'm just a broken sword spirit, and I won't have any malice against you. Sword spirit. Jian Wushuang's heart trembled, and he looked at the black-robed old man, who claimed to be a sword spirit in front of him in disbelief. Only a real sword can lead to a deeper path. As early as when he saw this black-robed old man, Jian Wushuang had guessed his identity, but the only thing he didn't expect was Jian Ling. What a terrifying existence is the sword spirit that can grow to such a point. This is an unimaginable existence, even far more incredible than the sword fairy. The soul is born by the instrument, and the soul is transformed by the soul, and eventually becomes a sword spirit, and it continues to rise to the limit, reaching the ultimate. And now this old man is the ultimate sword spirit. At this time, the black-robed old man chuckled again. I forgot to say that, long before I fell asleep, I was already the pinnacle of great fairy. Peak Dian Immortal, above rank 9, is the closest existence to the emperor's perception. Even in the age of ancient times, Peak Dian Immortal was extremely rare. And this black-robed old man is not just a sword spirit, but also a pinnacle great fairy. This has completely exceeded Jian Wushuang's imagination. A sword spirit has ascended to the pinnacle of great development immortal. What level of existence should its owner be? Nan Xian was completely speechless. During with Jian Wushuang, the things that happened, the Yinxian he saw, and even the existence of the legendary Dianxian, they are far beyond imagination. The realm he was so proud of at first seemed to feel so unworthy. Jian Wushuang swallowed his throat. He would never have thought that there would be such a terrifying existence in these 3 inches of mountains. The black-robed old man didn't care about the shock in his eyes at all, and continued, Little friend, the stars and rivers are turning. The Chinese New Year is changing. I would like to ask, where is this place where I sleep? Although he was shocked in his heart, Jian Wushuang still experienced countless battles, and soon calmed down, saying, belonging to the big division domain. Great, see you? Very good, very good. The black-robed old man showed a very satisfied expression. Then I will ask again, who is the emperor of this big CU? The emperor in the big division is Zhen Wuyang. Speaking of this, Jian Wushuang's eyes clearly understood a bit. Chapter 5077. A pinnacle great Yin Xian asked such a grand question, which in itself already explained the problem. Jian Wushuang had roughly guessed who the master of the sword spirit was. After learning the news, the black-robed old man's complexion recovered, and he nodded and said, "The Emperor's fate." Immediately afterwards, his gaze circulated on Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian, and finally fell on Jian Wushuang. "Little friend, I wonder if you have met Emperor Jin Wuyang?" He barely left any traces. When this sentence fell, or any earth-shaking black-robed old man shook his head and laughed at himself. After adjusting his mind, how can I ask such a question? I have seen it. What are you still in a daze? Followed. His expression as calm as senses. The black-robed old man looked at him with a wry smile and said, "And he couldn't believe it. The more I get along, you really have seen that I can't see you through. How can you possibly have seen it? If you can't see through, no wonder the black-robed old man had such a reaction. The top priority right now is to get out of here. Of the entire vast and endless great division, squeezing the Lingjing into his arms. Already the supreme existence. Nan Xian nodded and followed him down the mountain. The heaven is located, standing on the top of the mountain. Just the heaven is not something that ordinary evangelists where the black-robed old man was standing and left. The true face of the whole sword mountain or sword mound seemed to have no aura anymore. Man would be so gaff about swords and sword blanks disappeared. In order to avoid the hidden dangers caused by words, after leaving Jian Wushuang added, "The road ahead is no longer a rugged mountain road. I used to wait and see from afar, with bluestone." He suddenly realized, the avenue is so wide that it stretches into the depths of the clouds. Although there were loopholes in the words, he was still prevarication. But Jian Wushuang couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. As soon as he set foot on the bluestone avenue, he could feel that the old man was innocent, aura quietly just rose. Reminiscing about the some things in the hot aura suddenly rose from the wilds and black-robed old man burned everything. Since the little friend has seen Emperor body, he felt this strange hotness. But this extremely hot followed quickly emperor named Yu Chang and was replaced by the extreme cold. Taboo, alternating hot and cold, trembled. Makes people uncomfortable. He was far more familiar with this name taboo than Jin Wuyang. Nan Xian escaped from the dead, then stretched out his hand to stir in the air. And the fate of one side in the heavenly court made him particularly impressed. If Yin Xian is above the Tao of heaven, then Dian Xian is not only above the Tao of heaven, old man but can also modify the rules of the Tao of heaven at will. Then how is he doing? As for Nan Xian, as Dian everything is fine, it's okay. It was nothing more than simple for him to modify the heaven and earth. His way of heaven and contented smiles. Soon he finished the revision has been learned and changed the weird weather into a cloudless empty. Jian Wushuang couldn't laugh or cry. If the black-robed elder didn't to modify the way of heaven, this first level would have passed. For the sake of the weather, as the voice fell, he stretched out his hand and waved. This horrible weather is gone. And in an instant, all the scenes retreated like a tide. The obsession is over, and said with a smug face, "I will really fall asleep next." Jian Wushuang nodded before going forward. The black-robed old man said with a smile, didn't have any fluctuations. Jian Wushuang was startled. Then the second pass realized where the heavy twilightness came from. He was not sure whether the master craftsman is inevitably heading for difficulty. As if to confirm his speculation, the black-robed old man finally said, "Breaking power. The old man is about to die. Jian Wushuang didn't think it would be easy next. If the little friend doesn't dislike it, paved with bluestone, he has the right to think about it. To be the second level." As the voice fell, only through this broad avenue object was thrown towards Jian Wushuang. The craftsman He stretched out his hand to catch Jian Wushuang was not sure whether he could unlock the secrets on the bone armor of the Tianzi flowed after seeing the master's power. He still had no hesitation. Little Lingjing. "There is a word, you little friend, cherish it." After speaking these last words, the figure of the black-robed old man turned into a long wind, scattered invisible. An inky blue huamang was like a swimming fish and a light swallow, moving in the air, and finally returned to the diamond crystal in Jian Wu's hands. Jian Wushuang looked at the diamond crystal in his hand, a sword spirit from that ancient time, the peak Dian immortal, just like that. Even if the news is more illusory, I still look for it. At this moment, Nan Xian suddenly said, "Little friend, you said that on this avenue, there will be no immortals guarding here, right?" Chapter 5078. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth moved slightly, and when he was about to speak, he was interrupted by a wave of restless wind. energetic. Both of them were vigilant at the same time, staring sharply at the clouds lingering on both sides of the avenue. Where is the visitor, dare to come here to disturb? An ethereal but extremely calm voice resounded, and then a crisp crane came out of the clouds. Then, the clouds broke open, and a red-crowned white crane with wings spread 10 miles flew out, and on the back of the white crane sat a long eyebrow and long beard white-robed old man. Good fellow, what are you talking about? Nanxian whispered, ready to fight. The white-robed old man jumped down and landed on the bluestone avenue, and the red-crowned white crane with its wings spread 10 miles in the wind changed, and became a boy when he landed. One old and one young, one tall and one short, two fairy gods stood there, blocking the way forward. However, this is only the beginning. Several figures broke through the clouds and fell to the main road, blocking their way together. There are a total of 5 physiques, 5 evangelists, centered on the white-robed old man, walking towards Jian Wushuang. Where is the visitor, dare to come here to disturb? Nan Xiangang wanted to do something, but was stopped by Jian Wushuang. Then he said, I have no intention of harassing. I am waiting to come here just to see the craftsman Su Tua, and I beg you to help me out. Quiet it. Then please come back. The craftsman Su Tua never sees guests. The white-robed old man said in full, suppressed in his voice. Jian Wushuang didn't care, and continued. Please tell me, just to solve your doubts. Once you are done, you will leave immediately. Are you not able to understand the words or something? Do you really want this general to expel you? The big man with round ears said angrily. Looking for death. Nan Xian snorted coldly, and slapped a palm in the air. The next moment, the big man with square ears and round face snorted without any warning, and his huge figure was directly taken away. 2 nosebleeds drew an arc in the air, and then all fell on the white robe of the old man. All this happened so quickly that when the remaining Yinxian reacted, the big man with square ears and round face collapsed on the ground and passed out. Regardless of wiping off the nosebleeds on the white robe, the old man with long beard and beard shouted in his throat. Do it! Be careful to keep your hands. Just stun all of you. It will be troublesome if you don't continue the meeting. Jian Wushuang quickly asked, for fear that Nan Xian would kill him. Don't worry, I will treat them well. Nan Xian lowered his eyebrows and smiled, and his figure disappeared in place instantly. Then, the next battle lasted only 10 breaths, and after 10 breaths the wind stopped. Nan Xian stood back to Jian Wushuang's side and let out a sigh of relief. It's really unhappy. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. In front of him, the group of immortals who had just had the bones of immortality were all tied together at this moment, and they all passed out. The fainted Yinxian didn't even think that it would be Dianxian who would fight them. This is almost crushing. As long as Nan Xian thinks, one finger can crush them completely. With a group of Shoguan immortals being knocked unconscious, such a broad avenue leading to the clouds was completely opened. Jian Wushuang sighed silently before moving on. Even if there are hundreds of immortals on the road ahead, for him now, all solutions are only a matter of time. How can it be possible to return to the starting point after reaching a higher level? What's more, there was a genuine Dian immortal accompanying him on the journey this time, and he would definitely not lose. 3 levels have gone to 2 levels, only the last level is left. At the end of the broad avenue, there are rolling peaks, endless clouds and mists are rolling and rising. On the top of this rolling mountain, a suspension bridge spanning thousands of miles is suspended in the clouds, dangerous and dangerous. It's really enough to pretend to be gods and ghosts, and to walk through mountains and rivers to meet each other. Standing in front of the suspension bridge, Nan Xian sighed. In this situation, there is really a bit of meaning in the mundane world that men pursue women. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, with a lot of emotion. Nan Xian also smiled. Naturally there will be more emotions. After all, I have spent life after life in the earthly world, watching them rise up high-rise buildings, and watch them collapse. Naturally I will have a lot of emotion. They are only a short life, not enough time for us to breathe, but they still live diligently, which is really worthy of praise. Jian Wushuang quietly listened to his sentiment, and there was a softness in his eyes. From the beginning, you can see the main road. In this way, a discussion was unfolded in this cloud top. Union is ethereal, gathered together and scattered. I don't know how long it took, when the suspension bridge under his feet disappeared and was replaced by a solid ground. Jian Wushuang realized that the last part of the road was gone without any waves. The third level is it also passed? He still felt a little incredulous. At this time, a clear voice sounded. No, of course it hasn't happened yet. I am here. You have thought about it. I am afraid it will be difficult. As the sound fell, the clouds quickly dissipated, and a series of pavilions above the clouds appeared, row upon row of grandeur to the extreme. On the opposite side of Jian Wushuang, a young man with a red chest and extremely strong arms, holding a long sword, looks unwavering. This is an immortal, cold and aloof. He looked at Jian Wushuang and said directly, I want to fight you. Nan Xian smiled. This kid, I really can't think of it. Jian Wushuang didn't care about it and nodded. Okay, but before that, I want to ask you first, does the craftsman Sutua live here? Say it first. The young man yelled and cut it down with the sword. Nan Xian retreated to make room for this fight. Facing the falling sword, Jian Wushuang didn't release the invisible sword, but with his hands on his back, he greeted him straight up. With the sword in the air, smashing the clouds by hundreds of feet, he just leaned slightly to hide. This young man is a fairy. His opponent's long sword control is also extremely accurate. Step by step, close to Jian Wushuang, thousands of sword lights burst out from the sword, like a huge light covering the sky coming down. However, Jian Wushuang just waved his arm and smashed the sword light in the air. Immediately afterwards, he stood upright and came directly in front of the young man. He stretched out his middle and quietly clamped the sword. Ding! There was a crisp sound, and the snow-white long sword broke into several segments, leaving only one hilt. One finger pinched off the long sword. The sword was dazzling with no double-faced color, and a burst of force popped out of the fingers, which directly smashed the young man out. The clouds shattered, and he rolled in embarrassment in the air, and finally fell in front of a pavilion. Haha! When he turned over, he gasped, I don't believe it, come again. Chapter 5079. The young man Yanxian got up quickly, took out a long sword from somewhere, and cut it at Jian Wushuang. This time, Jian Wushuang's movements were even faster. Almost the moment the young man left, he shot. Using his palm as a sword, Jian Wushuang drew towards his head and seized his long sword at an unimaginable speed. The young man who flew upside down barely stopped his figure, his eyes full of humiliated resentment. Jian Wushuang, who had captured the long
Walking
sword,
slowly on the
didn't
fiery
rush to
red
do
flowing
it.
clouds
Instead,
was an old
he
man
glanced
with
at
a
the long
slightly
sword
black
in his
face
hand
and a
made it by
relatively short
himself?
stature.
I want you
He
to take
stared
care
into
of
a
it.
pair of bull's
The young
eyes,
man's complexion
carrying his
suddenly
hands on
turned
his
red,
back,
and
as
he
if
was
he had
proud
been
of
stabbed
himself
in a
without
source
anger.
spot.
Trying
When the
to
young
reach
man
out
saw
his hand
this,
to
he
regain the
trembled
sword
and buried his
but
head
Jian
lower.
Wushuang took a
Jian
step ahead of
Wushuang
him,
retreated half
his
a
arm
step,
shook hard,
nodding slightly,
and the long sword in his
stocky
palm
old
was
man
shattered,
with a black and
leaving
red face
only one
stepped
hilt.
into the air.
The long
stood
sword
in front
shattered
of him,
and the
and
blade
then looked
shattered into
directly at
pieces,
Jian Wushuang,
falling like snowflakes.
looking up and down.
You are deceiving
After a
too
long
much.
while, he said
The young
coldly,
man was furious.
"Is it you who
and
guided
suddenly
me
drew
without
out a long
shame?"
sword,
Jian
stabbing
Wushuang said
Jian
in a
Wushuang.
condensed voice.
Jian Wushuang
"I
could
can't
bend
talk
to
about
avoid
guidance,
and
but
at
I
the
don't
same
want to
time
waste
said,
such a good seed.
"The sword is too
Good
brittle
Miaozi,
and has no
the
aura."
stocky old
The
man
only
suddenly
thing worthy
sneered.
of praise
"My
is that the
disciple is
impurities have
notoriously
been
dull.
completely tempered
Among
and
my many
cast very
disciples,
carefully.
it is the countdown."
The young man
How can
stiffened,
good Miaozi say?
but then continued to
The
fight
young
again.
man kneeling on
Jian
one knee
Wushuang
heard
seemed to
master's
be
conclusion of
extremely
the coffin.
interested in seizing
His
the
face
sword,
suddenly turned
and
pale,
within a few breaths,
the fairy
he
body
seized
began
another
to
sword.
tremble.
This
And
sword
it
is
seemed
better,
that he might collapse
much
at
better
any
than the
time.
two previous
The blow
sword
of this
blanks,
language
but
is
it's
far
still
more
a sword
terrifying
blank.
than the previous
You
sword
dare to
capture.
deceive people too
Despair
much.
breeds.
This sword is
At
also
this time,
good,
but it's
Jian
still a
Wushuang
blank.
spoke
Come
again. To
In
cast
this way,
a sword is to
what
cast
was originally
a
a fight
The
turned
suffering
into a
in it
farce
is far
fight.
beyond what
The
an
young
ordinary
man was
monk
like a
can
sword
bear.
library.
There are countless
Constantly drawing
swordsmiths
out
in the
his long
universe,
sword to stab
but
Jian
who is
Wushuang.
worthy of being a
But Jian
craftsman,
Wushuang,
who is
like a
worthy
master,
of casting the
stood
most
in the
precious
clouds and
treasure?
grabbed the sword
In
and
fact,
commented,
it was already
then
destined at
shattered
the
one
very
by
beginning.
one.
In the
Hearing
end,
this, the
the
short
young
and
man
fat old
simply
man
handed the
sneered.
sword in his hand,
Absurd.
waiting
Who
for
dares to
comments.
say that it is destined?
Watching this scene,
Jian Wushuang
Manxian
smiled
couldn't
and
help but
looked
was
at him.
dumbfounded.
Dare to
Can
ask
it be like
senior,
this?
but is the craftsman
In the end,
Sutua?
the young man
Yes.
was unwilling to
The
speak.
humpty old man said
Who are
simply,
you and why do you know
"But
swords
what does it
so
have
much?"
to do with your
Jian
destiny?
Wushuang didn't answer
After
him,
he was confirmed,
but he said,
he secretly
"Okay,
breathed a
all the
sigh of
questions are
relief,
answered,
and then
now
continued,
it's up to you to answer
then
my
dare
questions.
to ask, how many
No,
disciples are there
the young
under
man
the seat of the
simply
master?
refused.
I won't
Junior,
tell you that my
you are
master
killing my
lives
patience.
here."
Okay.
The stocky old
The
man
air
frowned,
solidified, obviously
and the
in
corners of his mouth
dissatisfaction.
twitched slightly.
Jian Wushuang
He had
smiled
obviously
slightly,
realized that he was
"Don't
the
dare."
fastest for a
But
while,
the kid dared to
and he
assert
told
that no
master,
matter how many
Jian
disciples
Wushuang
there are under
sighed.
the seat of
It
the
seemed
master
that this guy's
craftsman,
head was not
there will
working
be
well.
and only two of
The
them
next
that
moment,
can reach your
a
level
somewhat
in the
sullen
end.
voice sounded.
The figure of the
"Enough,
pudgy
you
old
stupid
man who was
fool.
frowning
You have
was
cast your head
obviously
as a fool."
startled.
Jian
Calm,
Wushuang's
and there was a
eyes
hint of
condensed
shock
for an
that could
instant,
not be hidden
looking
in
at
his
the
eyes.
clouds ahead.
But soon,
The clouds
he
were far
recovered and
near,
continued to
mottled
sneer.
sparks flying in it.
It's pure
Like a
nonsense.
huge furnace.
You don't even
And the
know how
clouds
many
and smoke
disciples
began
under
to
the
turn
old
red.
man's seat.
After
You
hearing
dare
this
to make such an
reprimand,
assertion?
the young man
No
hurriedly
matter
knelt
how
on
many,
one knee.
there will only be
His
two.
face flushed to the
Jian
equator.
Wushuang smiled
"Master,
mysteriously.
forgive me.
Senior
The
dared to
disciple is
take a
dull.
bet.
Which
and
two do
failed
I
to
know?
complete your request.
Bet. Why
The
don't you
clouds
dare
seemed
to
to
gamble?
boil, like
I'm
a melting
afraid that you will
furnace,
speak wild
and
words."
the entire sky began
The
to
chunky
boil.
old man
Seeing
disdainfully
this
said,
scene, then
"Jian
Jian Wushuang's
Wushuang's
breathing was a
Happy
little
senior.
short.
If I
The
guess
closer
which
he
two
got
they
to
are,
the truth,
please
the more
promise
it
me
made
one
him
condition."
nervous. As the sky blushed and boiled, naturally,
A slightly
as
squat
long as you
figure
have
slowly
guessed it,
walked from
let
far
alone
to
one
near from the
condition,
end of the
there are
sky.
10. Perceiving
And I
the
will depend on
fluctuations
you.
in the air and the
Jian
air,
Wushuang nodded,
Manxian's
raised his
expression
palm
changed.
directly.
He
Hurriedly
pointed at the
hurried
young
to
man
Jian
who was
Wushuang
still
side
kneeling
and
in the
whispered,
cloud, and said
"Attention.
firmly, "The person
This
who
is the
came as a
first
giant
one.
immortal whose
The long
strength
wind
is
blew
not
up
below
suddenly,
me." Making the young man
How
whose
could
mood fell
Sutua,
into the bottom
who
of
is
his
so
mind to
famous
lift
and
his
extremely
body,
mysterious
in the entire Desai domain, not die an immortal? Moreover, Jian Wushuang guessed that the craftsman Sutua might have existed since that ancient time. Chapter 5080. He couldn't believe it. It was only a few hours after this meeting that he broke off his young man Yin Xian, who had nearly 100 long swords. It was too unimaginable to say that he could match Master's words in the future. Seeing Jian Wushuang so determined, even the stocky old man was shocked, but quickly dismissed. It's really ridiculous nonsense. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. I am nonsense, only you know. Tell me why. The stocky old man stared at him, rather solemnly. He nodded and continued. The reason is very simple. His sword-making technique is not clever. It can even be said that he is still in the introductory stage. It can be seen that this is clumsy. However, he used diligence to make up for his weakness. Only in the previous battle, he showed nearly 100 swords, and one was better than one. If I guess right, the swords he forged definitely exceeded 10,000. The young man kneeling in the clouds suddenly raised his head when he heard the words, looking at Jian Wushuang in disbelief, as if he was surprised by the secret discovery. After listening, the short and fat old man shook his head and said, Diligence can make up for the clumsiness. This is a ridiculous saying. From ancient times to today, how many monks can reach the end? Jian Wushuang smiled. Qing can indeed make up for the clumsiness, but this is only as an initial condition, and more importantly, will his master spare no effort to teach? He shook his sleeves. The words are irrational, then who else is this disciple? Nan Xian was quite nervous watching from the side, and in the mist he clearly came here with Jian Wushuang. Why did he not find anything? But Jian Wushuang was talking? Jian Wushuangdo said. The youngest disciple with the most agile eyes is the second one. As soon as this remark came out, the short and fat old man could no longer conceal the astonishment in his eyes, and a terrifying force directly covered the entire sky. Who are you and how do you know so much? Say. Nan Xian was like a great enemy, and also released a surging and terrifying force. But Jian Wushuang is still very indifferent, completely unaffected by the short and fat old man. I'm here just to ask Senior Master Craftsman a question, and there are no other messy thoughts. As for why I know so much, you calm down first before I tell them one by one. In an instant, the tit-for-tat power dissipated, and the stocky old man recovered his previous indifference. But there was no more contempt in his eyes. Please say. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, I've been looking for Senior Master Craftsman for some time, and finally entered this world under the accidental collision, and even more coincidentally, I met Senior Masters. There are nearly 50 disciples. Due to the vision of the sky, those disciples fled in panic, and even discarded the sword blanks on the shore at will. But one of them fell into the water because he firmly embraced the sword blank. It was I who rescued him, and had a brief conversation. From his eyes, I saw unspeakable obsession and talent far beyond my peers. These two disciples are my choice. After speaking the last sentence, Jian Wushuang nodded and looked at the stocky old man. Silent for a long while, the world was silent. The short and fat old man has sharp eyes like a sword, and he is constantly looking at him. He said in a hoarse voice for a long time, Are you the one who sits down? No, I am not a force of any kind, only a tourist floating in the sky and the earth. Jian Wushuang said decisively, without hesitation. He seemed to be judging whether what he said was true or not, and finally he smiled secretly. Really an interesting junior. Well, I've said enough, let me do it. After the short and fat old man finished speaking, he turned and walked toward the depths of the clouds, and his voice also sounded. Don't kneel there, idiot. Cast me 1,000 more swords, and after the casting go to Jianshan. Upon hearing this, the young man solemnly said, Observe, master. Jian Wushuang smiled and shook his head, bringing Nan Xian to keep up with the stocky old man. Immediately afterwards, the young man followed him step by step, then solemnly arched his hands. I am stupid and can't say anything, but I still have to solemnly thank you. Jian Wushuang smiled and waved his hand. Thank me, I don't have to. I will pester your master more and learn more. I will. He was very firm, his eyes hot. After going through the last level, the craftsman Su Tuo took the initiative to show up, which saved Jian Wushuang a lot of troubles, and gave him a preliminary understanding of Su Tuo. The Sansuan Mountain universe is far larger than some ordinary universes, and it is very powerful and suitable for cultivation. But Jian Wushuang guessed that in the entire Sansuan Mountain universe, there were no more than 100 monks, or even fewer. However, although monks are rare, there are so many pavilions in the sky, and you can easily feel the exquisiteness when you shuttle through them. The stocky old man carried his hands on his back and moved forward unhurriedly. But Jian Wushuang followed closely behind, did not speak, and was content. For nearly half an hour, shuttled through the clouds, and finally came to a very magnificent dojo. The dojo is square with 100,000 li on the edge, and is made of black rock. There is a peculiar atmosphere that surrounds the whole dojo. If it is not too shocking to talk about this dojo alone, what makes Jian Wushuang feel surprised is the giant cauldron placed on the dojo. There are a total of 10 giant cauldrons, each of which is huge to the extreme, like sacred mountains on the dojo. The black-red magma, like boiling soup, rolled and roared in the giant cauldron, and the boundless sparks overflowed with shock. At the same time, the derivation in the sky formed 10 violent eddies, all of which poured into the giant cauldron, shocking. It is conceivable that once the magma in the giant cauldron falls, it will be an unimaginable disaster. Here is the dojo where the master Su Tuo created the most treasures. The stocky old man stopped and looked at Jian Wushuang. You are the only outsiders who have come here besides the disciples under my seat. It's an honor. Jian Wushuang nodded. The pudgy old man was extremely satisfied and couldn't help but nod it. The humble junior. He has the demeanor of the old man. Next, under his guidance, Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian proudly entered this magnificent dojo. Layers of dark blue power fluctuations are like a huge enchantment, protecting this square dojo. Stepping into it, an unspeakable pressure hits his face in an instant. Unprepared, even Nan Xian, who was dying immortal, couldn't help but snort it. The weight here is far more than any heaven, even hundreds of times the void. I am afraid that if Yanxian rushes to set foot here, he will instantly suffer irreparable damage. Chapter 5081. Even Jian Wushuang felt that layers of shackles were added to him, and he couldn't breathe. The short and fat old man seemed to have taken it for a long time, and then explained, "The heavy pressure here is deliberately made by me," and then solemnly arched his hands. To quench the impurities in each piece of slab. Su Tua looked at him meaningfully, Nan Xian mumbled softly, and then walked quickly toward the center of the dojo. I didn't even let it go. Armor of the sky. The chunky old man didn't care about Nan Xian's words. The scene in the dojo changed, but turned to look at the ground vibrated. Junior, and soon a fairly magnificent hall appeared. Fortunately, it's located in the center of the dojo. After adjusting quickly, he nodded. Su Tua hurried into the hall. The pudgy old man looked at him and said with interest, "The hall is magnificent. You are not as simple as just resembles a library of books. No matter from the performance or the degree of hovering in the hall. The collection of books in this hall is probably not much better. What do seniors look like to me? Pavilion? I don't know, but I can feel that you are not as simple as it appears." More importantly, he entered the hall. I feel loneliness with a wave of his hand. Lonely? Hundreds of ancient books of unknown age fell on the case. The short and fat old man waved his hand. Immediately afterwards, well, let's not talk nonsense. He quickly compared the ancient books. What is the purpose of your coming to me this time? And began to compare the dense patterns on the bone armor of the sky. Jian Wushuang was not idle either, seniors to solve their doubts. And began to look through ancient books for comparison. Jian Wushuang said, looking at the same time solemnly took out a palm-sized object from the Boyang bottle, and also looked for bone armor with a sky pattern, white and shiny. The chaos of the ancient books in this hall made Jian vicissitudes of life, who was above the rules of heaven, of Emperor Hui and Yanli reaching the unimaginable realm of the entire sky-shaped bone armor. You can use the power of the heavens to instantly comprehend the words. The appearance of such a sky-shaped bone armor directly attracted the eyes of the short and fat old man. It is not difficult for them to master ancient writings and languages in one breath. Snatched the bone armor of the heavenly word pattern bone armor was too weird, and looked at it carefully. The power of heaven's Jian Wushuang didn't dare to breathe in the air. Concentrated his eyes. There was dead silence in the hall. Only the news about master scrolling is currently the only one in this great development, and he constantly rubbed the bone armor of the bone armor of the sky, but he didn't have any clue. If no one is complacent, eyes kept searching for any ancient book. News has been completely how could there ruined. Be such ancient words? This is an unacceptable fact for Jian Wushuang. Su Tua's complexion became more solemn. Only and Master his eyes were a little red. He has been closely related to his growth. Nan Xian's voice and suddenly absolutely unwilling. The pattern of this book seems to match the bone armor at this last moment. Jian Wushuang's figure was shocked. It affects his heart. And he hurriedly looked at the ancient book in Nangshuan's hand. Is it related to him? Which had only a few pages. Where did he go? Everything is a mystery. A step ahead of time passed, reached out to grab the ancient more anxious and ran back to the pudgy old man with a tight brow. Taking a deep breath, he tentatively asked, said in a deep Senior voice, Master Craftsman, at this moment, explain it? Calm Rao the stocky old man named restrain his mind, suddenly raised his head and stared at him closely. This ancient book, where did you get this thing? Jian has only a few dozen pages. Hands, with weird writing and full of an atmosphere of tortuous and difficult. Before so I can't tell you yet. Su Tuafu interpreted it verbatim. Extremely important to me. And I still ask for explanation. Dongdu. After a long silence, Su Tua's word-for-word interpretation. This thing is too old. This mysterious I'm afraid that there is no immortal evolving that can unravel the content showed its original face to Jian Wushuang. Impossible, for the first time. You should have a way. Jian Wushuang said anxiously. The words and phrases I have that read were the not text content of countless celestial were like a straw that made Jian Wushuang. And I also know the various texts of the Wang for the first time. But the text content on this bone armor. Why do I have such a familiar feeling? I have never seen it before. Su Tua looked at him at his desk. This bone armor encountered a bottleneck, and cold sweat came out of his retreated half a step. How can I not interpret these words? If even Su Tua, a master craftsman who reads countless words, can't identify it, then who else can identify this entire Desiyu, or Daanhuan? At this moment Su Tua suddenly said, however, I can try to recognize it. Chapter 5082. In a word, Jian Wushuang's mood fell to the bottom again. These words are forbidden and cannot be interpreted at all. He raised his head and said in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang was silent. He had already faintly noticed that everything related to Xian Yi was strictly restricted. This is enough to see from the divine power universe. But he was still a little unwilling. Is there really no way, Senior Master Craftsman? I'll continue. Su Tuo took a deep breath and continued to investigate at the desk. Nan Xiandao. What is this thing? Why is it so difficult to interpret? Even Dian Immortal can't help it. I'm afraid there is really no way to untie it. Jian Wushuang's eyes showed a bit of bitterness, and he could feel that this Tianzi pattern bone armor was imprisoned by some kind of power, and the text was forbidden. The craftsman Su Tuo couldn't understand it. Opened. But at this moment, Su Tuo suddenly said, Upper Jidongdugua. Ji Shangyang? At this moment, Jian Wushuang's mind felt like Wanjun thunder exploded. Upper Jidongdu, enjoy the sun. In just 8 words, both strange and familiar to the extreme, scenes from the past reappeared. That experience of wandering in the Wangu Wushuang auction house appeared again. The black-robed figure who was eager to hurry said the words, I live in the sun from the east. Everything is like modeled fragments, gradually being pieced together to heal. Upper Jidongdu passing Ji Shangyang. What exactly do these 8 characters mean? And why can the figure of the black robe, who rushed to say the words that fit these 8 characters? Everything is like a fog, but it cannot be removed. Su Tuo's complexion was a little pale, and at the same time there was disbelief flashing in his eyes. He seemed to realize something and wanted to get up and stay away from the case. But as soon as he got up, the originally lustrous sky-shaped bone armor suddenly turned into a completely black color, like black charcoal. The lustrous white light also turned dark purple, which was extremely strange. At the next moment, centered on the bone armor with the sky character pattern, a turbulent turbulence burst out suddenly. Nan Xian was the first to react, and without any hesitation, directly pushed Jian Wushuang a few dozen feet away. At the same time, the dark purple vortex destroyed everything, and instantly expanded to a size of 1,000 meters, destroying the entire hall in an instant. And Su Tuo was directly swallowed by the dark purple vortex because he was closest. Senior, Jian Wushuang shouted anxiously. Regardless of the vortex raging, he directly released the invisible sword and slashed it up. Zheng dash, the sound of gold and iron strikes resounded, and the vortex was chopped open a gap, but it did not suffer more damage. Instead, it appeared to cover the sky. Little friend, hurry up, the old Ji Ren has a natural appearance, let's leave it alone. Nan Xian said loudly, and then involuntarily picked up Jian Wushuang and ran. Stepping out of the main hall in one step, the violent vortex directly shredded the main hall, and the entire dojo was filled with a layer of dark purple haze. The entire dojo was shaking, and the 10 giant cauldrons also trembled, and the lava enough to destroy the world was scattered. Damn it, where did this storm come from? And how can you reduce its power? Putting down Jian Wushuang, Nan Xian frowned and said. An extremely bad premonition flashed in Jian Wushuang's heart. That kind of breath could not be resisted, as if it had straddled endless time. It was a supreme restriction, and anyone who dared to peek into the mystery would be the most terrible condemnation. At this moment, the entire vast and magnificent dojo was obscured by the dark purple eddy current, and the power was exhausted. Being in it is even more depressing. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and grabbed it in the air, and then opened his palm to look at the smog. The violent vortex was gradually dissipating, turning into a black mist in the sky. Master, I'm afraid it's dangerous, he muttered to himself, and an invisible sword appeared in his hand. As soon as the invisible sword came out, the brilliant red-gold pattern became the only bright color on the entire sky. The violent vortex covering the sky eventually receded, but Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian became solemn at this moment, because they saw that on the site of the original hall, a thin figure stood. The skinny figure wore an extremely wide black robe, completely concealing her figure, and the only bare palm raised high the master Su Tuo. Divine blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth, and it was obvious that he had suffered extremely severe damage earlier. All of this happened so quickly, and it became what it looked like now in less than 10 breaths. And being able to make a dying immortal have no power to fight back in a very short time. Then what terrible existence should this weird figure be? The dark purple haze was flowing slowly. Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian had already transported the yin power in their bodies to the peak, ready to respond at any time. Su Tua, whose neck was clamped by a hand, groaned in pain. Who are you? Because the black robe is too large, it is impossible to see any features of the black robe's figure. The only thing that can be felt is the pressure that cannot be resisted at all. Say, who are you? Su Tua struggled to speak. But what was waiting was another palm through his chest. The blood of the gods was spilled, and the fairy body was directly torn apart. Su Tua's eyes were rounded, and Yanli began to flow quickly from his body. After that, the black robe was like throwing away rubbish, and discarded it at will. The next moment, before he could make any more movements, a red gold pattern suddenly fell like a flowing cloud, tearing a crack in the sky, and then slashing heavily on the black robe. Sneer! The void was cut open by a crack, and the invisible sword that was more than 1,000 meters long penetrated the sky and the earth, tearing the black robe to pieces without any hindrance. Little friend Jian Awesome, Nan Xian exclaimed loudly, seemingly relieved. But before his words fell, Jian Wushuang's figure in the void flew upside down, as if he had suffered some kind of unresistible blow, and was defeated. Nan Xian was shocked. His figure instantly came to the void, and reached out his hand to catch Jian Wushuang. Go! Jian Wushuang, whose entire chest had collapsed, roared in shock. And you read www.akanshu.com and forced Nan Xian away at the same time. The sky suddenly rippled, and the black robe that had disappeared appeared again. He raised his palm up, and quietly pressed it to Jian Wushuang's chest. Boom! An unimaginable aura fluctuated the sky and shook the earth, and instantly tore a crack in the sky. And even Jian Wushuang with the 9-day clothing profoundness could not withstand the blow at all, and the fairy body was instantly fragmented. Then his whole broken body was like a kite with a broken wire, floating down and falling into the giant cauldron full of lava. Wushuang! Nan Xian yelled in surprise, unable to believe what was happening before him. This is just a short period of time. There was 1 death and 1 injury. Chapter 5083. Su Tua, a master craftsman, died on the spot. And Jian Wushuang was bombarded into the giant cauldron's lava in the short instant of the confrontation. This is too terrible, too tragic. Rumble. The giant cauldron began to deform, and the bottom suddenly shattered. The lava that could destroy the world suddenly vented out of the cauldron, like an out-of-control dragon. The heavens and the earth changed, and the heavens of Sansuan Mountain were directly broken. The clouds shattered, and the dark purple haze surged crazily. Everything is full of extinction. The black and red world-killing lava instantly swallowed nearly half of the dojo and began to burn. The entire sky is chaotic and red. Nan Xian was extremely anxious, and Jian Wushuang, who was beaten into the lava in the cauldron, would surely be miserable if he was not rescued in time. This is a situation he never wants to see. So Nan Xian set off and ran away the moment Jian Wushuang fell into the giant cauldron. But the next moment, what greeted him was an unbreakable barrier. The dark purple mist surged wildly, forming a thick barrier, which actually blocked Nan Xian's path. "Get away!" he hummed angrily, and directly released the supreme strength that belongs to Dian Immortal. But the next scene that appeared was unexpected to Nan Xian. The supreme power that is enough to surpass the heavens and modify the heavens. When it touches the enchantment, it quickly melts. At the same time, a large black robe descended like darkness, hovering in front of Nan Xian across the barrier. His eyes condensed, almost at an unimaginable speed, withdrawing the long sword hanging from his waist, and stabbing the black robe outside the barrier. The enchantment shattered, but the long sword stopped in front of the black robe, no matter how hard it was. Sword tip to fingertip. Hypo slowly stretched out a finger and pressed it against the tip of Nan Xian's sword. Nan Xian was shocked and wanted to take the sword, but was shocked that he couldn't control it at all. Ding ding ding! The crisp sound of broken gold and iron sounded, and his close-fitting long sword, which was enough to fight Jian Wushuang, broke at this moment. Broke in every inch. The black robe smashed the long sword to pieces with one finger, and then cast off unabated, blasting a dark purple beam of training. Nan Xian was already unavoidable, and could only watch the dark purple beam of training beams stab him. The immortal body, stronger than the heavens, was easily shattered at this moment. His entire right arm was instantly shattered, and his entire right shoulder was penetrated by that terrible potential energy. The blood of the gods was spilled, and Nan Xian no longer had the strength to fight, and fell into the lava. In 10 breaths of time, another great Yin Xian was wiped out almost instantly, but the black robe used only one finger from beginning to end. The dark purple mist covered the sky and the sun, and the endless lava pouring from the giant cauldron had swallowed the entire dojo and was burning the clouds. Like a broken kite, the Nan Xian fell into the lava, and the black robe didn't seem to let him go, and the figure began to move towards him. However, at this moment, the rolling lava suddenly opened a crack, and Su Tua, the craftsman who was originally dead, was resurrected. Although his stature was short and fat, he was extremely flexible and saved Nan Xian instantly. Then he quickly stuffed a pill into his mouth. "Boy, wake up the old man." Nan Xian coughed out a mouthful of divine blood, and his breath was wilted to the extreme, and he was obviously seriously injured. "I'm not dead yet. It's easy to want to die, but not so easy to want to live. Cheer up the old man," Su Tua shouted in a low voice. Then he held Nan Xian in a hand and prepared to flee. However, everything has undergone major changes. Even Dian Immortal is simply unable to recover. The black robe that appeared from nowhere can easily kill the craftsman Su Tua with one palm, and defeat Nan Xian with another finger. Its true strength is far more terrifying than revealed. A wisp of cold sweat flowed from Su Tua's temples. He had avoided the catastrophe through suspended animation before, but this was not enough to prove that he could resist the black robe. Instead, it made him understand that this black robe was too terrifying and too powerful. There is no reason for the powerful, only endless despair. Next, it seems to be to confirm Su Tua's ideas. The sky suddenly collapsed and shrank, and an irresistible force was like a chain, instantly squeezed from the wilds. Su Tua and Nan Xian snorted at the same time,
and then froze in place, unable to make any more movements. The black robe appeared in front of them again, slowly raised his thin and wide palms, and pointed them forward. A ray of pure and strong dark purple aura gathered in the palm, full of destruction. Su Tua's eyes were round and round, and he could predict that as long as this aura came, even Dian Immortal would never be able to survive. But he couldn't avoid it at all. The dark purple aura of endless destruction burst out and swallowed it directly towards Su Tua. The next moment, a slaying resounding that almost shook the sky. The giant cauldron shattered, black and red magma flying around, burning the sky. And in this, a beam of light that resembled a meteor in the sun suddenly tore through the mist and blasted toward the black robe. Boom! Su Tua only felt that his eyes were covered by the crimson color. And then he and Nan Xian were shocked by the huge force. The dark purple aura collided with the crimson light beam, erupting the most violent explosion. It was just this time that the slaying exploded, and the whole dojo was on the verge of breaking. The 10 giant tripods in the dojo shattered 6 in a row. The black and red lava in the cauldron is no longer bound, like a dragon falling to the ground. At this moment, countless gods and trees, countless lives and spirits were swallowed by lava. The earth has become a purgatory, a container of lava, and mountains and lakes have become ashes. There is a big battle. The previous Shigangshin saw this unimaginable scene, and they all rushed towards the dojo without stopping. And the disciples of the craftsman Su Tua were all dispatched at this moment. The destruction of the broken world is still continuing. Because of the sudden explosion, the master craftsman Su Tua and Nan Xian were able to breathe. At the same time, Su Tua lost his voice. Impossible, how could it be that kid? Nan Xian, who was barely recovering, couldn't help laughing bitterly when he saw the scene in the distance. In the extreme distance, facing the black robe, was Jian Wushuang wearing a 9-day clothing. The heavy damage suffered by his immortal body has been completely recovered. As a result of tossing in the lava, his robes have been completely shattered, revealing the azure blue Jiutian Yixian. Zuanhe's patterns flowed around him, and the power of the endless avenue bloomed again. The way of guarding, the way of Wushuang, the way of killing, and the 3 avenues have already been added, making Jian Wushuang completely horrible. The violent wind raged, blowing the robe of the black robe into a hunting sound. And he moves again.
Chapter 5084. The skinny palm of his hand protruded from the black robe, like a chain that controls fate, and began to strangle. The sky vault directly collapsed and shrank, squeezing it as it did with Su Tuo before. That invisible and innocent powerful force was like a shackle, instantly strangling Xiang Jian Wushuang. Broken, he snorted with a deep voice. And the true shadow of the selflessness directly added to the body. The true shadow of the selflessness, which was more than 10 million feet high, composed of countless scarlet blood and directly shattered the like invisible a waterfall descending from the sky, swallowing defeating the black robe attack. At the same time, thousands of blood redons deflated the mountains and rivers. Everything was swallowed and obscured by the blood. Appeared behind the black robe disappeared immediately afterwards. Standing in the extreme an invisible distance, sword surrounded by the Xuanha pattern pierced into his chest without any hindrance. Watched this scene in amazement. The black robe shattered for a long time. Thousands of scarlet golden light beams emerged from the black robe's chest. Are you sure it's just illuminating the dark purple sky? Shook his head. That's how he died. His very body recovered in a very short time. Although there were still hidden wounds, his eyes full of disbelief. 60 to 70%. I don't know if it's just a little yin, but my way. And it is incredible we don't to wipe this opportunity to erase that terrible guy. But things are far from none of us will survive. Just as Jian Wushuang completely shattered the black robe, his expression dignified. A large black robe quietly appeared behind him. Sansuan Mountain Jian Wushuang had also noticed it. Rumble. But he couldn't make any sacrificial explosion continued, so he could only fight back. The entire vastness of the Sansuan Mountain as if carrying the eternal had already been destroyed for more than half. If this heaven did not have the blessing of the Master Su Tuo, and the entire I am afraid it would have been broken including into powder. The 9 heavens Yishuan. But right now, was swallowed and covered by countless strands of cold light. The destructive power of Wuxia seemed to be imprisoned blessed by the way of killing. After that, has reached an unprecedented level. The depths pressed even rank 6 Dian Immortal will be hit hard in this kendo. The sound of the golden and iron strikes with all his strength, and Jiu Tianyi hovered in the void, seemed to be unable to bear it at this moment, falling violently, and fine cracks began to relax his vigilance. This is the first time that he could feel that kind of breath only disappeared along with the cracks under the impact of Wushuang Kendo. The immortal body that also began to shatter. Finally gritted his teeth. His eyes were red, robe that resembled a nightmare appeared again under the sky that exposed the immortal body. At this moment, using the blood of the gods as the guide, who was invaded by the way of killing, had a bit of bitterness the way of killing. Under such a crazy offensive, was blessed again. He couldn't even get him injured. The scarlet blood covered the sky. Where did this black robe come from? The violent blood and energy actually offset the weird and extremely cold at this moment. Su Tuo with blood-ons covered the sky, and with one finger, a violent vortex. Nan Xian has no resistance. Jian Wushuang abruptly reversed the situation of depravity. To be able to do murder, I am afraid that even rank 9 Dian Immortal that has long surpassed the realm of Yin Dian Immortal is completely displayed at this moment. And it seemed that only the sky could explain the terrifying extent and the heaven that belonged to Sankunshin eventually shattered. Nan Xian has already come to him, avoiding Jian Wushuang's the black robe together. However, could it be that he would really be the pinnacle Dian Immortal to destroy the black robe completely? But how could there be such a weird pinnacle Dian Immortal, a little mountain and river, in the heavenly character the huge peaks armor of the sacred mountain descend from the sky, thought to himself, suppressing the black robe. If this black robe is really the peak of the great emperor, which was transformed from pure force, even if they are all also dead, swept up, I am afraid it will not cause any harm the sky to it. Fire, black and the robe is the supreme falling down at this moment. Thinking of this, a scene of destruction, Jian Wushuang looked at and Jian Wushuang did not stop there. This matter has nothing to do with condensed into scarlet blood. Fell in his hand. Please leave here and I will resist. Su Tuo couldn't help snorting when he heard the words. Star River, you are too despising. The 2 swords of the galaxy came out. Today, the old man will never take a step back. But the sky was when it is appropriate to get out. And terrible gullies of hundreds of millions of miles. I won't report my revenge today. Chaos, I will have trouble violent out of control eating became the main color. Nan Xian shouted coldly, his eyes locked on the black robe for an instant. Jian Wushuang heard the words. His eyes were bitter, and the strength of the black robe had already exceeded the scope of their response. If they stay resolutely, they will count as one, and they will never be alive. This is the supreme oppression given them by the black robe. Chapter 5085. When Jian Wushuang was thinking about how to persuade them to leave, He Pao set off again. He is like a body without feelings, only to wipe out all enemies. The broad palm of his hand protruded from under the black robe, and it was just a grasp of it from a distance. And the power that was enough to break the imprisonment of billions of stars came directly down. The power of boundless imprisonment shattered any heavenly Tao, spreading power, suppressing Jian Wushuang and others. At this moment, they shot at the same time. Qijin Huagong burst out from behind Nanxian, like a huge burning sun, brazenly confronting him. The dark red light wheel of Yanli quietly circulated around the master Su Tuo. At this time, it belonged to the unique light wheel of Yanli of the 6th rank, representing the symbol of the supreme way. The true shadow of selflessness, which is more than billions of meters high, condenses with Jian Wushuang as the center, glaring at him, and burst out with boundless power. The three paths are completely different, but the terrifying power of the great Tao that is enough to destroy any celestial plane will cover the sky. There was no sound of stigmatization that smashed billions of stars, and there was no unspeakable destruction. There is only silence, nothingness. Taking the impact as the origin, the entire sky of the 3-inch mountain universe, even with the endless emptiness, has become a dying nothingness. Blank, blank, only blank. Nan Xian, the weakest in strength, coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his arms were broken every inch. The imprisoning power released by the black robe was too terrifying, almost turning everything he went through into an eternal emptiness. The craftsman Su Tuo was about to be unable to bear it, and the Yanli light wheel that was circulating around his body showed signs of extinguishing. Because of the blessing of the true shadow of the selfless, Jian Wushuang's situation was rather stable. He quickly knocked out 3D pin pills from the Boyang bottle and stuffed them into the mouths of Su Tuo and Nan Xian abruptly. Su Tuo was still a little bit reluctant, but found that he instantly recovered to his peak state. His eyes almost stared out. And Nan Xian's injuries fully recovered within a few breaths. Jian Wushuang and others, who had been suppressed to the extreme by the force of imprisonment, once again stubbornly resisted. Master! At this time, an abrupt call sounded, and then on the only remaining earth in Swordsman Mountain, one body after another soared and swept toward the void. Su Tuo's figure trembled, and then he saw dozens of disciples rushing towards him, almost shouting out of their souls, "All to the old man, don't come up!" But it was too late. The black robe slightly tilted his head, and then raised his palm to instantly explode the tyrannical dark purple horseman. Once hit, all the disciples will undoubtedly die. Su Tuo was already desperate. Even if he shot, it was too late. But in the next moment, Jian Wushuang quietly disappeared. When he appeared again, he was in front of nearly 50 disciples. "Rewind, this is not a place for you to stay." After speaking these last words, the extremely violent dark purple puppet training Huameng broke out. Jian Wushuang opened his arms, abruptly resisting all the outbreaks. This special power that even the magical craftsman Su Tuo of rank 6 Dian Immortal could not resist, all vented on his back. In an instant, blood poured out of his mouth and nose, and the fairy body began to tear in a large area. "Hurry up!" At this time, the previous Shoguan immortals appeared, hurriedly dragged all the disciples with Yanli, and fell to the mainland. But Jian Wushuang couldn't hold on anymore. To the back of his heart, Jiutiani Xian quietly shattered. The endless dark purple pony training Huameng penetrated his back heart, completely erupting in the fairy body. Little friend! Su Tuo and Nan Xian, who had completely seen this scene, yelled in shock at the same time, and they coughed out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Like a rain of blood, large expanses of colorful blood spilled into the void. A broken body quietly fell from the void. Su Tuo and Nan Xian couldn't hold on anymore. The imprisoning power that covered the sky smashed all resistance and came down. Nan Xian passed out directly, like a lone geese falling towards the earth. And Su Tuo finally passed away in a faint, and plunged into the earth already covered by black and red lava. The roar of lava rolled, and turned the earth into a purgatory. Several guardians, as well as a group of appalled disciples, are standing on the top of the highest sacred mountain at this moment. not knowing what to do. On the back of a huge white crane, Jian Wushuang, whose figure was fragmented and almost unbearable, was panting slightly. Su Tua and Nan Xian also leaned on by his side, life and death unpredictable. The sky was completely shattered, and hundreds of billions of miles of nothingness had become eternal nothingness. Only a piece of land on Swordsman Mountain still existed. This is desperate to the extreme. Everything is on the verge of destruction. Pattern. He landed in a large black robe, and his breath turned into nothingness. Such a battle did not cause any trauma to him. Standing on the top of the mountain, the black robe walked slowly. Bai Haqingyi seemed to feel the breath that made it terrifying. All the disciples stepped back slowly. Only panic was left in their eyes. The previous terrible battle is still vivid, and even their master has been defeated. How can they resist? Facing this irresistible enemy, a total of 5 Shoguan immortals stood up at this moment and resolutely stood in front of all the disciples. Without saying a word, Yanxian with square ears and round face rushed towards the black robe. But before he even had time to release his strength, he was strangled to pieces by a wisp of dark purple huamang. Then the second and third Shiganxian rushed to the black robe without any hesitation. However, their endings without exception are sad. The black robe of a rank 6 Dian immortal can be wiped out at will. How can they be able to compete? In the end, all the disciples had no choice but to retreat. The black robe slowly raised his palm, and an aura of destruction was once again engulfed in the thin and wide palm. However, in the next moment, could not be suppressed, and almost hysterical anger suddenly resounded from the void. Jian Wushuang, you have ruined me over and over again and again, and today I definitely want you to survive and die. The huge sound bursts covering an endless void. The void that originally became eternal and nihilistic has quietly arrived at nearly 100 figures at this moment. Every figure is extremely mysterious and extremely powerful, and the indescribable power is flowing slowly. And at the forefront of these nearly 100 figures stood a young man wearing dark golden armor, and proud and determined. He is the second emperor under the seat of Zhen Wuyang, the lord of the entire seat, and the sun corrects. In his sideways position, there is an old man in a landscape dress, with an unreasonable general trend flowing all over his body. This old man is the strongest man who has come out of the ancient times. 9-turn Dian immortal Chang Fu. Chapter 5086. Under the almost irresistible suppression of the black robe, with the Sankunshin Tianyu as the center, the emptiness of nearly 100 billion li has directly become the eternal annihilation. Millions of billions of miles is only an approximate situation. The real situation is far more shocking than imagined. Nearly 10,000 celestial planes shattered into dust in this battle, and endless creatures disappeared silently. You should know that although the southwest is the most barren area in the great sky, it still contains endless treasures and creatures. But now everything has become chaotic nothingness. The meaning of eternal extinguishment and nothingness is that it has become nothingness forever, and the way of heaven can no longer be born and rules cannot be derived. Only the blank persists. This kind of eternal extinguishment of nothingness. Even the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal cannot cause such damage. But now it happened. This almost made the Lord of Heaven, the young master, breathed out blood. It has only been tens of thousands of years since the last heavy damage to Duotian. Right now, this second heavy injury has almost completely ruined Duotian's southwest. How can this not make him angry? Moreover, he felt the most familiar aura in this devastating aura. The familiar breath is Jian Wushuang. Therefore, the young master was completely furious and directly carried all the background forces and killed him. Facing the only surviving continent below his eyes, Gong Zijiao completely believed that this was what Jian Wushuang did. Jian Wushuang, today I will let you not survive, but you cannot die. The extremely violent generative force once again filled the entire nihilism, leaving everything in turmoil again. But the black robe that was originally intended to wipe out a group of disciples directly, when he noticed that a powerful presence was coming, he retracted his palm, and then slowly turned around. In the next moment, a long sword was like a streamer, shaking the sky and the earth, suddenly shot down. At the same time that Hypo turned around, the long sword had already shot down, directly penetrating his heart. Zheng. The long sword trembled, exploding out of boundless momentum. Pretend to be a god, died Jian Wushuang. The young man chuckled coldly. He thought that Jian Wushuang would never survive a hit with this sword. Because this sword was a gift from Zhen Wuyang, the long sword will grow as its owner grows. So it is very special. The long sword entered his chest, and the dark golden huameng burst out from behind the black robe. Even Dian Immortal would suffer severe damage. But then, the behavior of the black robe made young Master Jiao's complexion drastically changed. He stretched out his broad palm, pulled out the long sword from his chest, and looked at it for a moment. As if thinking about something, his arm holding the long sword suddenly shook. The long sword presented by Zhen Wuyang was broken in response to that young man's body and hung it. The long sword wailed and shattered into nearly 100 fragments, spilling into the void. The fragments fell into the void, like stars and stars, and with unimaginable power, they shot at the young master and the others. The son's face changed drastically, and he took a half-step back subconsciously, holding 1001 step long. Facing this situation, waved his hand to forge an enchantment. Ding ding ding. The fragments arrived in an instant, blasting above the barrier, and it was instantly filled with cracks. This is the enchantment formed by the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal, which has a vague meaning of being unable to resist. Changfa's complexion slightly changed, and an incredible look appeared in his eyes. He is not Jian Wushuang. Gong Zijiao recovered from the shock, opened his mouth but did not speak. He obviously realized that the black robe was not Jian Wushuang. Because in his cognition, no matter how powerful Jian Wushuang was, it would never be possible to do such a degree of destruction. He frowned. Then who is he? Changfu shook his head, looked at the barrier that was almost broken in front of him, and said slowly, "The saboteur here is not Jian Wushuang but him. Is he going to be so terrible?" Gongzi Jiao's gaze became truly dignified. It is unimaginable that it can cause such a severe damage to the entire southwestern area. I am afraid that even Changfu can't do this level. A total of 213 long sword fragments were nailed to the barrier, and then the barrier was shattered. This is the first confrontation. Changfu knew that he had fallen behind. Looking at each other in the air, he frowned.
And the black robe also set off to sweep towards the void at this moment. Along with his departure, the only remaining land in the 3Cun mountain skyland instantly split into two. Facing this extremely weird black robe, Chang Fu directly confronted him. The sun corrected the figure of nearly 100 black robe behind him. Although these black robe figures are all immortal, they have mastered their respective immortal styles. They are quasi-day immortals. These are the last details of Gongzijio. Under the orders of Gongzijio, nearly 30 quasi-Dayan immortals gathered around the black robe and quickly approached. Chang Fu was shocked and said in a condensed voice, "Go back, don't go any further." But it was too late. Nearly 30 quasi-Dayan immortals had already released their own immortal styles and killed Xiang Haipo. At this moment, the eternal silence and nothingness all trembled slightly. The immortal cover that was enough to cover the sky came down, like 30 unattached chains, entangled the black robe for the first time, and completely bound it. Seeing this scene, the Sun Jiao heaved a sigh of relief, and then said, "Please also Changfu elders." Changfu nodded without hesitation. He is as heavy as an immortal mountain that has existed since the ancient times, and it reveals the trend of capturing people. In the wave of his hand, an aura that was beyond the realm of heaven and couldn't speak arrogantly came down, like 1,000 celestial mountains. Boom! At this moment, the eternal silence and nothingness trembled. 10,000 fairy mountains descended, and the indescribable feeling of suppression made all the quasi-Dayan immortals present fearful. The martyrdom happened again, and it was shattered with the black robe. The shock wave that was enough to make the heavenly plane easily shattered, instantly swayed, and lasted a long time. Exit! An excited smile flickered in Gongzi Jiao's eyes. But Chang Fu shook his head slightly. "I'm afraid things are not that simple." It seems to be to confirm his thoughts. At the center of the immeasurable blast, a black robe figure appeared again. His body is intact, not even the robe is broken. This scene stunned all the quasi-Dayan immortals. Resist the long support blow. And he hasn't received the slightest damage. What terrible existence is this black robe? When all the quasi-Dayan immortals were in a daze, the black robe moved. He didn't break free from the fairy chains entwined with him, but quietly shook his body. A total of 30 dark purple light beams as thick as fingers, peeking out of his black robe, with a weird light, climbed onto the fairy chain.
Chapter 5087. This situation only happened for an instant, and almost all the Quasi-Dian immortals didn't react, and they were entangled by the weird dark purple light beam. Ugh! 30 Quasi-Dian immortals wailed at the same time, the unimaginable imprisoning power, not only confining their souls, but also madly eroding their power. Within 10 breaths of time, 30 Quasi-Dian immortals were directly turned into dead bones. Because all this happened so quickly, after they all turned into bones, Gongzi Jiao reacted and lost his voice. How is it possible? 30 Quasi-Dian immortals turned into dead bones within 10 breaths of time, which made Gongzi Jiao unacceptable. Chang Fu is even more dignified. Those who can instantly absorb the power and luck of the great Yin Xian are all evil ones, and the strongest ones. The black robe at the moment must be the strongest. After inhaling the energy of 30 Quasi-Dian immortals in an instant, the black robe slid into the void. His goal is to help. Facing the sky-covering Zimong, he took a long step forward, then raised his palm a little. Suddenly, the endless air luck condensed into a bunch, violently shot at the black robe. Laugh! The light beam condensed by Qi luck penetrated the chest of the black robe without any hindrance. However, this only caused him to pause for a moment, and then rushed towards Chang Fu unabated. Chang Fu resolutely confronted him, and while he flicked his palms, the immortal mountain formed by supreme luck hit the black robe. Eternal silence and nothingness began to tremble. Facing the sky-covering fairy mountain, Hypo's right palm was condensed into a fist, and he banged heavily. The fairy mountain shattered in an instant, and the huge dark purple fist gang blasted towards Chang Fu unabated. His face condensed, and he chose to resist the punch. Boom boom boom. The fist gang broke out, and a series of ink-colored landscape patterns swayed around the body like water waves, offsetting this terrible punch. The Sun Jiao, who was protected by the long support, felt the terrible power of this punch, and his expression changed. Long hold back for half a step to completely offset this punch, and the black robe had already arrived in front of him, and a deep cold broke out. He raised his right palm, quietly condensing a group of dark purple flowers, and then rushed towards Chang Fu. This dark purple is extremely pure and terrifying, capable of destroying the power, and once punched the Master Su Tuo. Facing the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal, Hypo released this style again. This is a battle of peak combat power, a battle of supreme. As the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal that came out of that ancient age, it was enough to stand proudly on the top of the group. Their every move is enough to collapse order and destroy the heavens. And once they fight, it will be an unimaginable destruction, and even the talented and stunning Tianjiao will not be able to participate in this level of battle. At this moment, the eternal extinguishment and nothingness trembled again. Such a supreme battle has made all the Quasi-Dian immortals shudder, and they only feel that even staying here is a disaster. The intensity of this battle is far greater than the previous battle with Diqing. Facing the dark purple Huamang that can eat away energy and strength, Chang Fu shot with all his strength. The immortal mountains smashed towards the black robe, descending with the order of heaven. The full blow of ranked 9 Dian immortal shocked the eternal silence and nothingness. When the two collided, the waves that could destroy any celestial plane shook in an instant. Being so caught off guard, Gongzi Jiao and more than 60 Quasi-Dian immortals were directly knocked into the air, hundreds of millions of feet away. At this moment, the heavenly territory continent of Sansuan Mountain, which was divided into two and resembled Yiguozhou, seemed to become powdery at any time under this impact. The shock wave that can destroy even the order of the heavens swept through layers upon layers, making the remaining disciples of San Siyuan Mountain panic to the extreme. At the moment, there were only 2 Shigangshans killed by the black robe. Facing this shock wave, they couldn't resist at all. They could only choose to endure it, and it might be destroyed at will. At this moment, the figure lying on the generous and kind back of Baiha suddenly moved his fingers. Baiha noticed something, looked back, then cleared up. Wake up, this lord is awake." Seeing this scene, the youngest and quite immature disciple shouted excitedly. All the disciples hurriedly gathered around Baihe, waiting anxiously. No way, with such a serious injury, even Yin Xian is unlikely to wake up. a lean man said worriedly. The other disciples were also silent. Indeed, the three figures lying on the back of the white crane were all severely injured, but Jian Wushuang, who blocked the black robe's full blow with his own strength, suffered the most terrible injuries. His entire chest was penetrated, his limbs were shattered, and the broken Jiutian Yixian Du was completely stained crimson by the blood of God. This kind of injury is almost impossible for Xian Yuan to survive. How can it be resurrected? At this time, the young man who had initially fought with Jian Wushuang slowly got up, but then he reached out to Jian Wushuang and put his palm on his broken chest. The light blue dynamism flowed like soothing clouds, and you read www. A Khonshu, calm poured into the wound. The other disciples glanced at each other, and all contributed their own weak strength. For Jian Wushuang, they all expressed gratitude to help. Without him, nearly 50 disciples would never have survived. Drops of strength poured into Jian Wushuang's immortal body, slowly but firmly repaired. The young man said firmly, I don't know when he can wake up, but he must wake up. As time passed by, Jian Wushuang quietly opened his eyes on Beihi's back. Boom! Eternal silence. Nothingness is shaking, and the order of heaven is constantly reshaping and collapsing. The scope of this supreme war has become unimaginable. Above the original level of destruction, the entire vast world is in a turbulent situation. Heaven's order collapsed, countless celestial planes were affected, and nirvana became a fan. And all this stems from this supreme battle. The divine blood that contains the shackles of numerology wanders in the eternal emptiness of nothingness, immortal. And these divine blood were all scattered by Changfu. Heaven seems to be screaming, and the dark blue landscape suit has been soaked with the blood of God. His fairy body is about to dry up. Facing the black robe, Changfu already showed a sad expression. Each full blow could not cause any heavy damage to the black robe. On the contrary, the black robe could easily cause irreparable damage to him. Such a deep sense of powerlessness made him feel like he was falling into the abyss. Facing the black robe, Changfu made the last decision. He looked back and saw that the sun, who was hundreds of millions of miles away, looked pale and unbelievable at this moment. Chapter 5088. Wan Dao Jian Zun. From the initial calmness and complacency to the unspeakable sadness, Gong Zijiao felt a sense of trance about what had happened. But nothing can be changed. Chang Fu turned his head, his eyes calm. The long arms, which are already hanging down, are like a supreme fairy mountain at this moment, facing the black robe with an unimaginable trend. He seems to have become Changfu Mountain, suppressing all enemies. With Changfu as the center, the sound of great destruction resounded deeply. He held the black robe with his hand, and only burning divine flames remained in his angry eyes. You are definitely not a fairy, nor do you belong here. Leaving these last words, Changfu burned completely, and the foundation of the fairy source belonging to the ninth-ranked Dian Immortal was completely shattered. Hypo wanted to break free, but couldn't break free at all. This was the last thought of the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal, capable of letting the powerful of the same level die together. The immortal source of rank 9 Dian Immortal was smashed. It was too terrifying. Even the aftermath was enough to easily kill Dian Immortal, let alone the heavenly plane. However, all the celestial planes in the entire southwest of Domitian have long been destroyed, leaving only an eternal blank. Even so, the entire vast expanse is still in chaos. Unimaginable smashed, swallowing everything. The Sun Jiao, who was hundreds of millions of miles away from the battlefield, felt an irresistible pressure swept over him. His throat sweetened, and then flew backwards again. However, at the time of mystery, even on the edge of destruction, the only small half of the seat panel in Swordsman Mountain survived without any damage. The complete death of the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal lasted an extremely long time. The eternal nihilism became the main color. Is everything over? The dark gold armor was shattered, and the young man in a miserable situation stood up from the edge of destruction, leaving only bitterness in his eyes. There were more than 60 quasi-Dian Immortals who followed him, and there were only more than 50 quasi-Dian Immortals left at the moment, and nearly 20 quasi-Dian Immortals were turned into powder in this blast. His Royal Highness, let's retreat and go to the heaven to ask the Emperor for help. Yu Zhuan Dianxian whispered to him. Let me see who dares to retire. The sun yelled coldly, his expression gloomy. No one can retire unless this matter is found out. Promise. All the quasi-Dian Immortals nodded, dare not say any more. Afterwards, the sun rushed to the center of the blast with a group of quasi-Dian Immortals. At the center of the sabotage, everything seemed to have entered a state of chaos. The hovering blood and broken clothes all showed that a tragic battle broke out here. It's all gone. Seeing this scene in front of him, the sun was stunned. Changfu really disappeared. Changfu has disappeared, and the black robe has disappeared completely. This supreme battle seems to have ended. But at this time, the quasi-Dian fairy behind Gongzi Jiao carefully discovered that a hair-like mist was slowly moving and gathering. Your Highness, things seem a bit bad. It was still the former quasi-Dian Immortal. He felt a kind of heart palpitations recovering. The sun frowned and twisted, and was about to open his mouth to scold him, but found that in the center of the sacrificial explosion, layers of black light had gathered. The black ons gather, and a heart-pounding imprisoning force is coming again. Gong Zijiao's eyes widened to the maximum. It was a terrifying aura. Black robe. Black robe. The black robe that was destroyed together by Changfu at the cost of the death of the foundation of the fairy source, unexpectedly recovered again. He appeared again like an immortal nightmare. The dark purple huamang surged around him, extremely strange. Withdraw! Without any stay, the sun retreated frantically. Retreat quickly! But it was too late. The reunited and resurrected Yen Xian, with just one palm, wiped out the 20 quasi-Dianxians. All this happened so quickly that there was no time to react. The dark purple light beams with the thickness of nearly 1,000 fingers protruded from under the black robe, descending like a dense net covering the sky. Then, nearly 30 quasi-Dian Immortals had no time to escape, were imprisoned and fettered, and then exhausted their luck. The sun was so frightened that he escaped desperately. After coming and going, there were only 13 of the more than 60 quasi-Dian Immortals who followed. And this number is still decreasing, because that dark purple light beam swallowed Yanli Chi luck too fast. madly eating away all Yinxian. 11. 10 places. 7. 3. The Sun Jiao escaped frantically, but desperately found that the dense net was covering the sky. Once swallowed by the entanglement, you will be powerless. Damn it, what the is this? His eyes were cracked, but there was nothing he could do. When the last quasi-Dian immortal was swallowed, the Sun Jiao was already in danger. The dense net composed of dark purple beams of light, covering the sky and the sun, has already besieged it. Although it was a quasi-Dian immortal, the Sun Jiao very clearly knew that everything was already powerless. However, at this moment of life and death, an extremely familiar force aura suddenly appeared. Gong Zijiao only felt a tight waist, and then his whole figure escaped out of the range of the dense net of the sky, at an unimaginable speed. Sword Jian Wushuang? In shock he subconsciously yelled. Jian Wushuang turned his head and glanced at the young master, and then dragged him towards the last remaining Sansuan Mountain Heaven domain. With a plop, Jian Wushuang directly threw him on the top of the mountain. The remaining half of the celestial plane could be overthrown at any time, and the remaining disciples were all desperate. The divine craftsmen Su Tua and Nan Xian have awakened. Under the nourishment of the D-Pin pill, they both recovered 70% to 80%, but they still couldn't compare with Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang at this moment had returned to his peak state. If it weren't for the Jiutian Yi Xian to be somewhat damaged, no one would have thought that he had experienced a life and death crisis before. That guy is coming to us, the craftsman Su Tua said in a hoarse voice. Nan Xian clutched his chest, frowned and said, "It's really a ghost." Jian Wushuang looked at the black robe that was approaching, calmed, then whispered in a low voice, "Senior, you take them away and leave it to me here. I will buy you enough time." Su Tua was taken aback, then shook his head. "How can I go back? If you don't retreat, you will die in V. I hope you can understand that all the causes are because of me, and I should bear it." Leaving these last words, Jian Wushuang didn't stay at all, leaning forward to face the black robe. "That my little friend is right. You will die in vain if you stay here, so let's go." Nan Xian persuaded, then slowly got up. "I'll go with the little friends and buy some time for you together. You can leave soon." God craftsman Su Tua looked sad, looked at Jian Wushuang's back, and finally sighed in silence. Chapter 5092? Extinction and Resurrection. You can see it next time you open the bookshelf. If you like Sword Sovereign of 10,000 Ways, please recommend this book to your friends, QQ, blog, WeChat, etc. Thank you for your support. Chapter 5089. Facing the dark purple huamang that covered the sky, Nanxian jumped and swept towards Jian Wushuang. The Jiutian Yixian, which was somewhat broken, still exudes a azure blue glow, without dust and dirt. In the back of his heart, Jiutian Yishuan shattered a fist-sized crack, which just fit the original sword mark on his chest. Little friend, I'll help you. Nanxian rushed over smiling. Jian Wushuang was startled. He didn't expect Nanxian to come. Why are you here? Didn't I ask you to leave soon? Nanxian smiled. It would be boring to leave. I also want to try what kind of existence this guy is. Jian Wushuang knew that his heart was strong, and he could never listen to dissuasion, so he could only stay silent. After a tragic war of supremacy, the entire southwestern position of the sky was completely destroyed. As far as the eye can see, everything becomes an eternal emptiness. The breath produced by Chengfu Broken Xianyuan's foundation has not retreated, but Hypo has already recovered again. He is a real nightmare, from appearing to going through all the fairy tales. And even the death battle of the Nineth ranked Dian fairy is still intact, which is beyond imagination. I'm afraid the peak Dian is nothing more than that, right? Is this black robe a quasi-emperor? This idea was quickly denied by Jian Wushuang. In the Sea of No Edge, he had seen two quasi-emperors. One is Zhuandi Heiyun, who devours the luck of Dian Immortal. The other is Yu Yao, who sacrificed thousands of Dian Immortals, and eventually became Zhuan Emperor. They are terrible existences that can't speak arrogantly, and there is no order of heaven that can withstand them in the wave of hands. The quasi-emperor, at a certain level, was able to rank alongside the emperor. Regarding the terrifying extent of the Emperor Zhuan, Jian Wushuang had already felt it in the Sea of No Edge. The kind of air luck that could crush the eternity without any thought of resistance was far beyond imagination. Although today's black robe is almost immortal, even ranked 9 Dian Immortal can't hinder it at all. But Jian Wushuang can still clearly feel the gap between black robe and Zhuandi. This gap is extremely clear. For a moment he thought of the peak Dian Immortal. Above the 9th ranked Dian Immortal, it is the final state of Dian Immortal realm. Only Pinnacle Dian could explain why Changfu fought his body and did not harm him. However, even if it was ranked 9 Dian Immortal, it was not something Jian Wushuang could contend with, let alone the peak Dian Immortal. So at this moment, standing here is tantamount to dying. Even if it is the 3 backs, the immortal body is more advanced. It can't make him resist the peak Dian Immortal. And Nanxian, who was the 3rd ranked Dian Immortal, was no different from being sent to death. And it was impossible to cause any serious damage to the black robe. At the same time, Jian Wushuang was also wondering, why is there such a terrifying existence in the bone armor of the sky character pattern? Could it be that the black robe is guarding or imprisoning the content contained in it? This puzzled him, and at the same time made the sky-shaped bone armor even more confusing. Facing these two figures, the black robe slowly stopped, and the face under the wide hood seemed to be thinking about something. Jian Wushuang quickly took out 2 D-pin pills and stuffed them into Nanxian's hands, and he also licked several D-pin pills. This is to be able to break out the most terrifying general situation in a short time. He didn't ask for a draw with the black robe, but only bought time to leave for the craftsman Su Tua and his disciples. Damn old guy, I take revenge for the previous sword today, Nanxian said in a deep voice, once again condensed behind a giant sun covering the world. Don't look directly at Jin Wei Huang Huang. The chi luck belonging to the 3rd ranked Dian Immortal broke out completely at this moment. Nanxian held a newly formed sword blank in his hand, which was the blank sword he had drawn out of the sword mountain. The endless red golden radiance shines behind him, and the sun is shining, and it contains 9 red golden suns, like a real golden wheel, flowing slowly behind him. This was Nanxian Ziqiang's sword, full of indomitable decisiveness. At this moment, the golden wheel burst out with extremely bright golden light, illuminating endless nothingness. A total of 9 Qijin Rihue, using the sword blank as a medium, vented wildly and violently looted, turning into a 9-handed 100,000 zhang true sword, slashing towards the black robe. Jian Wushuang also moved, the invisible sword flowing with the Xuanhe pattern, easily cut off the order of the heavens that had just spawned and pressed down. Hypo stood in the same place, and did not make an evasive posture as before, but chose to resist. Endless dying and nothingness shocked, and the violent sound wave burst again. Because Yanli was too violent and violent, the sword blank in Nanxian's hand could not bear it, and it was directly shattered into nothingness. But his strongest sword eventually fell on Hypo's body. Rumble. The fiery golden light erupted. Nanxian tried his best to pierce the only remaining sword hilt in his hand into the left shoulder of the black robe. Jin Mang Dabo vented wildly at this moment. He cut off his left shoulder abruptly, and Jian Wushuang, who followed him, cut off the black robe's right arm almost without any hindrance. Yu reading www. Akanshu. Calm dark purple misty silk threads gush out from the black robe. This scene shocked Nanxian. He never thought that he could cut off one arm of the black robe. You know, the black robe can wipe out the terrifying existence of a rank 6 Dayan immortal with a wave of his hand. Jian Wushuang was also startled. He could feel that he had indeed severed his arms. The black robe, which was originally almost immortal, had his arms cut off at this moment, and did not immediately recover, but vented the dark purple haze silk thread. Jian Wushuang was the first to react, and quickly cast a glance at Nanxian, then faced the black robe, and released his kendo. Wushuang Kendo, Xingyahe the second style. River. The invisible sword pierced its chest with all its strength, and the towering Tianhe took Jian Wushuang as its source, and the invisible sword as a medium, and swept towards the black robe. This sword is a full-strength sword, doing everything. Nanxian also released the supreme power to blast towards the black robe's front door. They all know the truth about taking advantage of their illness, so they are doing their best. Boom! The immeasurable dust dies. The already shattered body of the black robe has completely turned into a powder, shattering the void. The incomparable slaying exploded, spreading hundreds of billions of miles, making the Sankunshan land, which was like a flat boat, even more likely to capsize at any time. Standing on the edge of the broken continent, the young man slowly lowered his arm in front of him, his face pale, eyes full of disbelief, because he saw that that figure, that person who was just a fairy, had accomplished an impossible thing. The existence that even Chang Fu didn't have the slightest way to destroy, was killed by Jian Wushuang, and became a fan. Unspeakable emotions flowed in his eyes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.